Chapter 3003. Jiyu Jinglian held Xiao Bao's hand as they got out of the car. The little guy raised his head and his eyes widened the moment he saw the magnificent reception entrant. Oh my God! It's so beautiful. Jiyu Jinglian held his little hand and tugged at his tie slightly. He was not used to such an occasion. Unless he had a close relationship with the Jiyu family, he would rarely attend an appointment. He knew very well that the Mu Group had sent him an invitation because the Shengyu Financial Group had been aggressively attacking them and making enemies everywhere. Naturally, the Mu Group was eager to rope in an ally. Jiyu Jinglian was the most ambitious target of the Mu Group. The Jiyu family was powerful. If they joined forces to deal with the Shengyu Financial Group, they would definitely have a chance of winning. No matter how powerful Mu Yaja was, he would not be able to withstand the combined forces of the Gus and the Muse. When the time came, Mu Yaja would be besieged on all sides, and Mu Linfeng would be most happy to see that happen. Therefore, Jiyu Jinglian saw through Mu Linfeng's ambition from the beginning and remained indifferent. However, Xiao Bao looked interested, so Jiyu Jinglian went to the appointment. Xiao Bao was full of novelty. The wedding scene in front of him was very different from what he had imagined. His impression of weddings was still the wedding of the daughter of the deputy chief of the police station in Yangcheng County. However, Mu Yangcheng and Song Enya's wedding was decorated like a palatial wedding. It was grand and magnificent. He had only seen such a luxurious scene in movies. Xiao Bao said, "Oh my God. The bride and groom must be super rich." Jiyu Jinglian snorted disdainfully. In the past, the Mu family had Mu Yaja, so he did not make any comments. However, the current Mu Group was just an empty shell of a wealthy family. He had seen the down-and-out aristocrats in England. Even if they were no longer rich, they still had to pay attention to appearances and ostentation. The current Mu Group had a debt of billions. That old man, Mu Linfeng, was headstrong and self-opinionated. He was no longer in his glory. This wedding was more like a trade fair. Jiyu Jinglian held Xiao Bao's hand and walked to the door. The reporters immediately noticed him. Jiyu Jinglian stood in the crowd. He was 189 meters tall and had an intimidating aura. He was dressed in a suit and wore a pair of sunglasses. His ink-black hair made his eyebrows look even sharper. All of a sudden, the media surged towards him excitedly. This was a rare occasion for Jiyu Jinglian to appear in public. In the past, he had always deliberately avoided the media and the public. Everyone in the capital knew about the rumors about the Jiyu family. They all knew that the head of the Jiyu family was a young, handsome, and ruthless man, but no one knew his true colors. Therefore, when Jiyu Jinglian appeared in front of everyone, the media was in an uproar. The crowd surrounded them like a tide. When Xiao Bao saw this scene, he was really shocked. He thought that something had happened and instinctively hugged Jiyu Jinglian's thigh and the corner of his shirt. Jiyu Jinglian lowered his head to look at him, only to see him clinging to his side helplessly and hugging his thigh like a frightened little animal. An inexplicable feeling welled up in his heart. This feeling was too unfamiliar and difficult to describe with words. However, he actually liked this reaction of the little one. He bent down slightly and hugged Xiao Bao in his arms, hinting at him with his eyes. Chapter 3004. Mr. Jiyu does not accept any form of interview. Thank you for your cooperation. Don't get too close. Please keep a distance of 3 meters. When Xiao Bao saw the group of reporters shouting Jiyu Jinglian's name and looking menacing, he was so frightened that he asked Jiyu Jinglian, "Uncle, they seem to want to rush over and beat you up. Let's run." Beat him up? Jiyu Jinglian's face darkened. What exactly was stuffed in this little guy's head? Was it cotton? He wanted to cut it open to see clearly. This kid actually thought that this group of people rushed over to beat him up. Who was he? Who would dare to beat him up in the capital? Do you have a death wish? He said angrily, "Who dares to beat me up?" If anyone dared to touch a strand of his hair, he would cut off that person's hand. Why else would they all come for you? You're not a big star. Shut up. Jiyu Jinglian said, "Don't spout nonsense if you don't know anything." Xiao Bao mumbled aggrievedly, "Uncle, you're too much. I'm so worried about you, and you're telling me to shut up. I'm just afraid that you'll be beaten to death outside because of your arrogance. Jiyu Jinglian, he resisted the urge to curse and walked to the door with a livid face. When Mu Linfeng saw him, he did not expect him to come. There was a look of surprise on his face, but when he saw his dark and cold expression, his heart skipped a beat and he looked a little embarrassed. He originally thought that Jiyu Jinglian would not come even if he had sent an invitation. He did not expect him to come with such a face. He even suspected that someone had angered him. Mu Linfeng immediately walked over with his cane and greeted him warmly. Mr. Jiyu. Sorry for not coming out to meet you. Sorry for not coming out to meet you. Jiyu Jinglian curled his lips coldly and looked straight at him. Obviously, he did not take his hospitality seriously. Xiao Bao looked around curiously, but his gaze landed on Song Enya. His heart seemed to be hit by something as his eyes stared blankly. Why did this woman feel so familiar? He seemed to have seen her somewhere before. He could not remember for a moment, but at first glance, she gave him a very disgusting feeling. Song Enya sensed a gaze on her. She followed the gaze and met Jiyu Cheng's eyes. In an instant, her face turned pale with fright. Why is it him? Her memory wasn't bad. She recognized at a glance that this child was the child she had left in the warehouse that day. Seeing the child in a man's arms, she looked at the man curiously. Even though he was wearing sunglasses, she recognized him as the head of the Jiyu family, Jiyu Jinglian. It was rumored that he had ascended to the throne at a young age and had been in power for many years. The Jiyu clan was under his command, and they were insufferably arrogant. It was said that at that time, Jiyu Jinglian was the only person who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Mu Yaja. Then, what was the identity of the child in his arms? Could it be Jiyu Jinglian's son? But she had never heard of Jiyu Jinglian having a wife, let alone a son. The only thing she was sure of was that this child must have a close relationship with him. Otherwise, why would he lower himself to carry him in his arms? Seeing the child looking at her curiously, Song Enya lowered her head guiltily and subconsciously avoided his gaze. Xiao Bao became even more curious and stared at her suspiciously. His mind was in turmoil as he searched for memories of this face. Chapter 3005. Xiao Bao lay on his shoulder and continued to look in Song Enya's direction. Seeing that he was restless, Jiyu Jinglian slapped his butt. What are you looking at? That bride looks so familiar. I think I've seen her somewhere before. Jiyu Jinglian ignored him. Seeing Jiyu Jinglian carry the child away, Song Enya could not help but rejoice. It was said that this child had a bad memory. He had probably forgotten about her and what happened that day. After all, how old could a child remember anything? She was just scaring herself. Song Enya comforted herself. After all, when she found out that she had kidnapped the wrong person, she did not do anything to the child. She did not scold him or hit him. She only left him where he was. Wasn't this little brat fine now? She was still wondering how this child managed to escape from that barren area. She was only worried that this child would not recognize her. However, on second thought, so what if the truth was exposed? After today, she would be the young mistress of the Mu family. In addition, she was the mayor's daughter. No matter how powerful the Jiyu family was, could they still stir up trouble at the wedding? At the very least, they should give some face to the Mu and Song families and not pursue this matter. Moreover, at that time, she did not know that this child had anything to do with Jiyu Jinglian. Besides, children were very innocent. They would be over with a little coaxing. Hence, Song Enya did not take this matter to heart. The wedding officially began. 2 flower girls walked into the venue. One of the boys walked in front with a ring pillow in his hand, while the other little girl obediently held Song Enya's skirt. Song Enya held Mu Yanqing's hand and walked to the center of the stage. Then, they stood facing each other. Baby Chu looked around curiously. Under the light, Song Enya's side profile came into view. His mind raced as he suddenly recalled something. Scenes flashed through his mind like a merry-go-round, and his face instantly turned gloomy. It's her. It's that woman from that day. In the center of the stage, Mu Yanqing looked at Song Enya's exquisitely made-up face. It was charming and moving, but Meng Qingshua's face suddenly flashed across his mind. Yang Cheng, you've always been my whole world. What about me? How much weight do I have in your heart? Yang Cheng, don't marry her, okay? Mu Yang Cheng, are you willing to have Miss Song Enya as your wife and enter into a marriage contract with her? In sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, you will take care of her, love her, respect her, and be faithful to her until the end of your days. Mu Yang Cheng opened his mouth as he struggled internally. The words "I do" seemed to be stuck in his throat, and he did not reply for a long time. His mind was filled with Meng Qingshua's face, and his thoughts were in a mess. Song Enya could not help feeling nervous when he did not respond for a long time. Yang Cheng, at the side, Mu Shuminit urged him anxiously. He was worried that he would cause trouble. Mu Yang Cheng came back to his senses abruptly. As if he had made up his mind, he said in a deep voice, "All right. I'm not willing. It's her. It's her." At the same time, the childish and angry voice of a child came from the guest area. "She's that bad woman." Everyone raised their eyebrows. Chapter 3006. Jiyu Jinglian's face darkened slightly. "Don't mess around." Xiao Bao did not care that all the guests present were looking at them curiously. Instead, he pointed at Song Enya angrily and said, "Uncle, do you remember what happened that night?" Jiyu Jinglian's eyes flickered slightly. Of course, he remembered. That night, he had a business deal in the suburbs and parted on bad terms. Before he left, he opened the car door and found the child curled up in the back seat. He was covered in dirt from head to toe and was carrying a small stray dog in his arms. However, in his eyes, such a disheveled child looked more like a stray dog. He did not hear the child talk about the cause of the incident himself, but Xiao Bao had told Uncle Fu before. Uncle Fu told him that the child was kidnapped to the capital by two strange men because even Xiao Bao himself did not know what was going on. He only knew that he was tied up in a warehouse, and then a woman he had never seen before walked into the warehouse. He did not know what she said to the two men, but after that, she left him alone in the warehouse, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. Xiao Bao only said that he heard the woman say that she had kidnapped the wrong person. Although he did not deliberately make things difficult for Uncle Fu, he felt indignant when he heard it. In such a desolate place, where there were few people, Xiao Bao was lucky to be able to come out unscathed. Think about it. If not for the coincidence that the chair had been soaked in the rain for many years and had corroded and dried up, what would have happened if he had not been smart enough to break free from the ropes and escape from the warehouse? There was nothing to eat or drink, and there was no rice or water. He was afraid that he would starve to death there. No one passed by that day, and no one lived there. He did not have a phone on him and could not communicate with the outside world. There was no way for him to expect anyone to come to his rescue. But so what if he broke free? From there to where there were people, it was a full 10-kilometer drive. Even if it was a car, it would take an hour. However, a car was a car. For a child, a 10-kilometer drive was a straight path to death. Not to mention a 10-kilometer drive, he would not even be able to walk to the end of it. However, Xiao Bao was too young. He only remembered the woman's characteristics, but did not know her name or her identity. It was difficult to portray the woman's image with only a few adjectives. He had originally thought that this matter would be left unsettled. However, Xiao Bao claimed that Song Enya was that woman. Jiyu Jinglian was surprised. "Are you sure?" "Uncle, I won't forget her. It was this woman. Get someone to tie me up and bring me to the warehouse." Xiao Bao was so agitated that he was trembling all over. He stared straight at the side of Song Enya's face as she turned away guiltily. "She's that bad woman. I won't make a mistake." It was impossible for him to be mistaken. If it wasn't for her, I guess I would have been left in such a desolate place. You don't know, if I hadn't met Uncle, I would have starved to death there. At the mention of grievances, Xiao Bao's eyes turned red. His nose sniffled as if he was about to cry. Like an angered little beast, he stretched out his tender claws and teeth, itching to pounce on her. Jiyu Jinglian's eyes darkened slightly as his expression changed. Song Enya was the woman who kidnapped his son? Good, very good. Interesting. Jiyu Jinglian suddenly stood up, raised his leg, and kicked the table in front of him where the champagne tower was placed. Chapter 3007. The wine glasses stacked on top of each other fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. The floor was instantly in a mess. The sudden loud noise startled everyone present. They stood up one after another and looked in Jiyu Jinglian's direction in horror. They looked at the wreckage at his feet in fear and confusion. Song Enya was stunned by Jiyu Jinglian's shocking action. Mu Linfeng and Mu Shuminit also stood up at once. At the side, Song Zhanghua and Jiang Qimeng heard the noise and looked in Jiyu Jinglian's direction. Their gazes fell on the champagne tower that he had kicked over. Only then did they understand where the huge commotion came from. Mu Linfeng hurriedly walked over with his cane and asked politely, "Master Jiyu, what's the matter? What happened?" Jiyu Jinglian did not look at him. Instead, he looked at Song Enya and said coldly, "Song Enya, you owe me an explanation." Song Enya was inexplicably flustered. She lowered her head guiltily and did not dare to make a sound. This child actually recognized her. How would she dare to make a sound when Jiyu Jinglian questioned her like this? Offending the Jiyu family was scarier than offending anyone else. Everyone knew Jiyu Jinglian's identity and the status of the Jiyu family in the capital. The current Jiyu family was no longer what it used to be. It was even more so that the Muse could not afford to offend them. If Jiyu Jinglian wanted to make things difficult for her, to put it bluntly, even the Muse would not be able to protect her. Song Enya trembled in fear. Not going to speak. Jiyu Jinglian's tone became increasingly displeased. "I'll give you 3 seconds. I don't have much patience." 1. 2. Mu Yangcheng was initially stunned. He did not know what had happened. Why did Jiyu Jinglian seem to want to cause trouble for no reason? The Muse and the Gus did not have any deep hatred for each other, so why did he want to cause trouble at the wedding? When he heard him mention Song Enya, he tugged at her arm and asked angrily, "Have you offended Jiyu Jinglian?" I don't know." Her mind was a jumbled mess, and she trembled with fear. Jiyu Jinglian hated it the most when he asked questions. He did not say a word. His patience was exhausted and he shouted coldly, "Speak." Mu Linfeng immediately held his arm and tried to persuade him. "Master Jiyu, don't be angry. Let's talk this out." Scram. Jiyu Jinglian pushed him away roughly. Mu Linfeng was caught off guard and fell to the ground. Frightened, Mu Shuminit hurriedly went forward to help him up, only to see Mu Linfeng's embarrassed and livid face. Mu Yangcheng bellowed, "Jiyu Jinglian, this is the Mu family's territory. You have no right to behave atrociously here." "Oh, it's not my turn to behave atrociously," Jiyu Jinglian sneered. "Do you think Mu Corporation is still the glorious Mu Corporation of the past? Stop putting on airs in front of me. Even if the person standing here today was Mu Yaja, I might not give him face." Oh my God! Shocking news. At Mu Yancheng's wedding, there was a dispute between the Gus and the Muse. At the side, a few media reporters swiftly recorded the scene with their cameras. Jiyu Jinglian glanced at the media from the corner of his eyes and sensed that someone was secretly taking pictures. His gaze was dangerous. The bodyguards standing beside Jiyu Jinglian also noticed the flashing lights. They immediately walked to the media and shouted, "Who was secretly taking pictures just now?" No one dared to respond. The bodyguards snorted and went forward to take away the cameras in the hands of the reporters one by one. Then, they smashed them all on the ground. The media instantly let out a few exclamations. Chapter 3008. "Ah! My camera." The bodyguard swept his gaze across the crowd, and the crowd fell silent. No one dared to speak. "You're not going to speak, are you?" Jiyu Jinglian saw Song Enya curled up in a corner of the stage. He nodded and said coldly, "I'm not going to get married." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd whispered nervously. They did not know what Jiyu Jinglian was going to do. He said to the bodyguard standing at the side, "Clear the venue." The bodyguards immediately moved out and chased the media reporters out of the door. Then, more than 10 bodyguards rushed in from outside. They were all Jiyu Jinglian's personal subordinates. They rushed into the hall and walked up to Jiyu Jinglian. "Master Jiyu, what are your orders?" Jiyu Jinglian said coldly, "Smash it." The bodyguards immediately nodded. Then, they immediately spread out in the hall and kicked all the tables and chairs over. The interior of the auditorium was decorated magnificently, with many flower racks and romantic circular arches. However, Jiyu Jinglian's bodyguards did not show any mercy and smashed everything. The guests were frightened and left their seats to rush to the entrant. The crowd was like a tide as they exited the arena. Many guests were so scared that they did not dare to move. They curled up in a corner and trembled. No one had ever seen such a scene. The Mu family was a big family with a big business, yet someone dared to cause trouble here. However, knowing Jiyu Jinglian's way of dealing with people, they were not surprised. Thinking that the Mu family would definitely not end well for offending the Jiyu family, they only thought of how to escape unscathed and protect themselves. When Xiao Bao saw this scene, he was so scared that he shrank behind Jiyu Jinglian, not daring to breathe. When Mu Linfeng saw this, he struggled to stand up with the help of Mu Shuminit. He looked at Jiyu Jinglian and said bitterly, "Master Jiyu, what do you mean by this? Let's talk nicely. Today is Yanqing's wedding. Why are you so angry and want to cause trouble for the Mu family?" Jiyu Jinglian glared at him. "Shut up. If you say any more, I'll smash you together with Disheng." Not long after, the originally magnificent wedding hall was reduced to a mess. Song Enya stared blankly at this ghastly scene, her heart in her throat. It was said that the Mu family had spent 300 million yuan on this wedding. Every piece of decoration in the venue was expensive. Just the flower arch alone was worth 200,000 yuan. The crystal goblet from the champagne tower was worth more than 100,000 yuan. Not to mention, the guests present were either rich or respectable. Some of them were even the leaders of the political world. Even the prime minister of other countries was present. Now that the wedding has been ruined like this, the Mu and Song families will only become laughingstock. Jiang Qimeng was scared out of her wits by Jiyu Jinglian's subordinates. Each of them glared at her covetously. Tall and mighty, they walked over with a swift and fierce aura. With a casual lift of their hands, the stage was overturned. She fell to the ground in fright and was immediately helped up by Song Zhanghua. Shameful, utterly shameful. Song Zhanghua strode in front of Song Enya and questioned angrily, "What did you do to offend Jiyu Jinglian? Say something." I really don't know anything." A few minutes later, everything in the venue was smashed into smithereens. More than 10 bodyguards returned to Jiyu Jinglian's side and waited for his orders. "Bring that woman here." Jiyu Jinglian ordered again. "Yes." Chapter 3009. The 2 bodyguards immediately walked up to Song Enya and grabbed her by the collar of her wedding gown. How would she dare to let them bring her to Jiyu Jinglian? She struggled with all her might. Jiang Qimeng and Song Zhanghua naturally would not sit back and do nothing. They stepped forward to help as well. Unfortunately, not to mention one Song Zhanghua, even 10 Song Zhengguos would not be able to compete with these 2 strong bodyguards. In the midst of their struggle, a rip was heard. Song Enya's strapless mermaid wedding gown was torn apart by the bodyguards. With a whoosh, the wedding gown slid down her chest, exposing her naked body to everyone's eyes. The crowd was in an uproar. Song Enya was so frightened that she let out a hysterical scream. She covered her chest in shame, but no matter how hard she tried to cover it, the beautiful sight of her invisible bra could not be hidden and was exposed to everyone's eyes. The wedding gown was a one-piece, and when it slid to the ground, even her leggings were exposed. Song Enya's face was burning hot. She felt as if the world had turned upside down and the sky had turned dark. Jiang Qimeng was already scared out of her wits, and Song Zhanghua was even more flabbergasted. However, the 2 bodyguards still did not show any mercy. With the wedding gown torn, they each grabbed one of her arms and dragged her. Song Enya struggled and screamed, refusing to go with them no matter what. One of the bodyguards gave her a hard kick. It was Jiyu Jinglian's order to bring her over. She had no right to say no. They were just following orders. Song Enya struggled, but one of them grabbed her by the hair and dragged her mercilessly all the way. "Ah! Help! No!" Song Enya was about to go crazy. She was naked, only wearing leggings and a strapless bra to cover her body. However, she could still imagine how the surrounding guests would look at her with contempt. She had a sense of shame, too. Being dragged naked on the ground in front of so many people, she was so ashamed that she wished she could die immediately. Ah! Everyone present could only hear her screaming at the top of her lungs. Song Enya was dragged along the floor by the bodyguard by her hair. Her head knocked against the legs of a table, causing her to feel dizzy. In addition, there were many broken corpses on the ground. Her skin was cut open, and her clothes did not cover her body. Immediately, she was covered in wounds and dripping with blood. By the time Song Enya was brought before Jiyu Jinglian, she was already in a mess. Jiyu Jinglian narrowed his eyes. He felt that such a woman was dirty even if he touched her. He asked Jiyu Changza, "Is it her?" Xiao Bao was dumbfounded and asked timidly, "Uncle, what are you doing?" He hated her, but he was also frightened by this battle. Jiyu Changza, listen up. You're my son. No one has the right to hurt you. As Jiyu Jinglian spoke, he glanced at Song Enya coldly. I won't let off anyone who dares to hurt you. Xiao Bao nodded in a daze. Uncle, I'm scared. Somehow, he felt that it was very cruel of him to do this. Jiyu Jinglian furrowed his brows. What are you scared of? The man squatted down and picked him up. Is this enough to scare you? Xiao Bao's good-looking brows furrowed slightly. Somewhat indignant, he puffed up his chest indignantly. I'm not scared. This bad woman deserves it. Jiyu Jinglian lowered his head and glanced at Song Enya, who was crying uncontrollably at his feet. His brows narrowed coldly. Chapter 30:10. Beat her up. Jiyu Jinglian cast her a sidelong glance. His nonchalant words sounded as if he were ordering his men to beat a dog. Hearing this, Song Enya could not help but curl up her body and retreat backward. She shook her head frantically and cried, Don't! Song Zhanghua reacted at once. Seeing his daughter being surrounded by the bodyguards, he rushed forward and stood in front of her to protect her. How impudent! Jiyu Jinglian, this is a public place. Don't act recklessly. You're assaulting a defenseless woman. Are you even a man? Song Zhanggua's voice was thick with the accent of a bureaucrat. Jiyu Jinglian raised his eyebrows coldly and said expressionlessly, Song Zhanghua, don't put on airs in front of me. Get lost, or else I'll beat you up too. How dare you? Song Zhanghua naturally would not step aside. With a dignified look, he said, Who dares to act rashly with me here? His words could be said to be awe-inspiring and righteous, but he had misjudged something. It was useless to put on airs in front of Jiyu Jinglian. Who was Jiyu Jinglian? Who would threaten such an insufferably arrogant man? Jiyu Jinglian sneered and could not be bothered to waste his breath on him. He ordered, beat him up together. As soon as he finished speaking, a few bodyguards immediately surrounded Song Zhanghua, grabbed him by the collar, and raised their hands to give him a hard punch. Song Zhanghua was completely stunned by this punch. The huge impact caused his whole brain to vibrate and buzz. Song Enya shrieked in fright, but in the next second, a slap came down on her face, causing her face to sway to the side. Bang! Bang! 4 to 5 bodyguards surrounded the father and daughter pair and greeted them with punch after punch. Jiang Qimeng let out a heart-wrenching scream at the sight of such a ghastly scene. She had never imagined that things would turn out like this. She scrambled over to Jiyu Jinglian and knelt in front of him with a plop. Grabbing the hem of his trousers tightly, she begged, Master Jiyu, let's talk things over. Stop hitting him. Stop fighting. Jiyu Jinglian kicked her away and said coldly, Get lost. One had to know that as a member of the Jiyu family, he had received martial arts training since he was young. With this kick, Jiang Qimeng rolled to the side like a rubber ball until she hit the wall and fell limply to the ground. The pain was so excruciating that her internal organs were about to be turned upside down. Mom, save me, save me. Song Enya's cries were still ringing in his ears. Jiang Qimeng refused to give up and crawled back to Jiyu Jinglian's side. She kept kowtowing and begging, President Jiyu, please spare my life. If they continued to fight like this, someone would die. Enya had just suffered a miscarriage a while ago, so her body was still very weak. If this goes on, I'll die. Sob, sob, sob. Stop hitting me. Stop fighting. I beg you, don't hit me anymore. Jiyu Jinglian remained indifferent and turned a blind eye to it, like a cold-blooded emperor. Xiao Bao hugged his shoulders and could not bear to watch this scene any longer. He suddenly looked deeply at Jiyu Jinglian. From his angle, he could only see the man's side profile. He was handsome, cold, and emotionless. However, even though he was young, he understood that this man was backing him up. Backing him up. This word was too unfamiliar. Chapter 30:11. Other than Chu Ho, no one would back him up. Today, however, he had a taste of being protected by someone. This man stood up for him and taught the bad woman who had bullied him a lesson. In his eyes, this man should be very bad. He was arrogant, cold-blooded, and sometimes very fierce to him. He would say things that made his heart skip a beat. However, it turned out that the feeling of having someone backing him up was so heartwarming. Xiao Bao's eyes could not help but moisten. He raised his hand and carefully rubbed his reddened eyes as he sniffled. Jiyu Jinglian could not help but turn his head, only to see him looking at him pitifully with reddened eyes, as if he had suffered a great grievance. The man could not help but feel even angrier. He thought that the young man was feeling wronged and could not vent the hatred in his heart. He turned his head and ordered, "Don't you have any strength in your hands? Give him a good beating." When the bodyguards heard this, they did not dare to delay and increased the strength in their hands. In just a short while, Song Zhengguo's face was swollen like a pig's head. Song Enya was not any better. Her face was bruised and swollen, and she could not even cry. She was almost numb from the beating. Jiang Chimeng cried until tears and snot streamed down her face. She kept kowtowing, but her forehead was swollen and bruised. Jiyu Jinglian did not even look at her and remained indifferent. She turned and crawled to Mu Linfeng's feet, begging again, "Second Master Mu, quickly think of something. If this goes on, Zhengguo and Enya will be beaten to death." Mu Linfeng watched this scene from the beginning. His expression was anxious, but his heart was trembling. He looked at Jiyu Jinglian. Such a young man actually had such a cold heart. Rumor had it that Jiyu Jinglian was young and frivolous. He was ruthless and would do anything to achieve his goals. He once thought that this was probably an exaggeration. However, after witnessing it with his own eyes, this man's ruthlessness was far beyond his imagination. Mu Linfeng felt his hair stand on end and became even more wary of Jiyu Jinglian. However, even though he was old, his brain was still working. He finally realized who Jiyu Jinglian's anger was directed at. Song Enya must have offended him, so much so that he was willing to offend the muse to punish her harshly. How could he step forward for Song Enya at this point? Otherwise, if they offended Jiyu Jinglian at this critical juncture, the Mu group would be implicated and the Mu family would not have a good ending. How could Mu Linfeng be so stupid? He was very clear that at this time, he naturally had to take a good stand. He absolutely could not interfere at such a critical moment and invite disaster upon himself. Qi Meng, it's not like you don't know what kind of person Jiyu Jinglian is. In order to achieve his goals, he had always been unscrupulous. Why don't you ask your daughter how she offended the Jiyu family? Apologize properly. Jiang Chimeng was even more confused as she cried, "I don't know either. The Song family and the Jiyu family have nothing to do with each other. Then why would the Jiyu family pick on you for no reason?" Chapter 30:12. If I knew that your daughter had offended Jiyu Jinglian, Mu Linfeng sucked in a breath of cold air and said with a straight face, "No matter what, I won't agree to this marriage." Jiang Chimeng was stunned and fell to the ground in despair. A bodyguard walked up to Jiyu Jinglian and asked cautiously, "Master Jiyu, she seems to be dying. Do you want to continue?" Jiyu Jinglian asked coldly, "She's not breathing anymore?" "Yes, she is, but she's already fainted." The crowd slowly dispersed. Jiyu Jinglian looked over and saw Song Zhengguo kneeling on the ground. His face was bruised and swollen, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. It looked as if he would collapse in the next second and never wake up again. Song Enya, on the other hand, had completely fainted. Her face was covered in blood, and her body was covered in bruises. Her chest patch had also fallen to the ground. She was in a terrible state. The bodyguard kicked her face, but there was no reaction. Earlier, amidst the chaos, one of them casually picked up a bottle of champagne and smashed it hard on the back of Song Enya's head. She fainted at once, and no matter how they kicked and punched her, she did not make a move again. Someone went forward to check her breathing. It was weak, but there were still signs of life. However, she did not wake up no matter what. It was not that they were afraid of killing her, but at this time, they had to ask for Jiyu Jinglian's opinion. If he ordered them to continue beating her until she was out of breath, they would continue. Jiyu Jinglian frowned and walked to Song Enya's side. He kicked her with the tip of his foot, and someone immediately squatted down to wipe off the blood-stained tip of his shoe. Master Jiyu, she's dirty. Don't dirty your shoes. Xiao Bao also saw Song Enya's miserable state. He was so frightened that he immediately hugged Jiyu Jinglian's shoulders. Such a little attachment stunned Jiyu Jinglian slightly, and the corners of his lips involuntarily curled up. He was unexpectedly satisfied with this little brat's dependence on him. Uncle, she's not dead, is she? Xiao Bao asked fearfully. No. Jiyu Jinglian was very confident. His men always knew what they were doing and would never kill anyone easily. Hence, he was certain that the Missy was still alive. Uncle, stop fighting. Xiao Bao pursed his lips and couldn't bear it. She looks so pitiful. Jiyu Jinglian said coldly, this kind of person is not worth pitying. However, he didn't finish his sentence. The next sentence was, even if you die, it's not worth pitying. Xiao Bao, on the other hand, felt that it was too cruel. He had already vented his anger by beating her up like this. Initially, he hated and was angry with Song Enya, but after being taught a lesson by Jiyu Jinglian, he pitied the woman instead. After being beaten to such a state, it was unknown whether he was still alive or not. Uncle, let's go. Xiao Bao tugged at his collar and said pitifully, I don't like this place. All right. Let's go. Jiyu Jinglian carried Jiyu Changze and was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something when he passed by Song Zhenghua. He turned around and glanced at Song Zhenghua, who had been beaten until he was delirious. With a look of disgust, he said, the Song family is one of the 4 prestigious families. However, from tomorrow onwards, the Song family will cease to exist. With that, he carried Jiyu Changze and left without looking back. As soon as Jiyu Jinglian left with his men, the guests did not care about etiquette and small talk. When they saw the door open, they hurriedly left. Chapter 30:13. Sobbing, Jiang Qimeng pounced on Song Enya and carefully hugged her. However, just as she hugged her shoulder, she heard the sound of bones breaking. She was so frightened that she froze and did not dare to act rashly. Where's the ambulance? Jiang Qimeng broke down and howled, call the ambulance. Send her to the hospital quickly. Send her to the hospital quickly. Only then did Mu Yangcheng react. Just as he was about to take out his phone to call the ambulance, Mu Linfeng stopped him in time. Second uncle, what's wrong? Don't interfere in this matter. Don't you think it's bad enough? Mu Linfeng said hatefully. If I had known that Song Enya had offended Jiyu Jinglian, I wouldn't have let you two get married. Don't you know that the Mu family can't compete with the Jiyu family now? That Jiyu Jinglian is vicious and merciless. If you send Song Enya to the Mu's hospital, given Jiyu Jinglian's character, he'll probably send people to smash the hospital the next day without a word. Mu Yangcheng was shocked and put away his phone. Mu Shumin also had a lingering fear in her heart. Trembling with fear, she asked, second brother, look, this marriage. Naturally, it can't be. Mu Linfeng snorted. Yang Cheng and Enya haven't registered their marriage, so it's fine if they don't get married. However, after today's incident, the Mus have lost a lot of face. Those media reporters' cameras have been smashed by the Gus people. Mu Yangcheng paused for a moment before saying, when the time comes, I'll send someone to inform them not to write about today's news article and pretend that this never happened. Do you think that the guests who came to the scene can't see? Mu Linfeng said angrily, when the time comes, 1 person will spread to 10, and 10 will spread to 100, where will the Mu's face be? Mu Shuminit also looked embarrassed. He glared at Jiang Qimeng angrily and scolded, you're such a troublemaker. When Jiang Qimeng heard the scolding, she turned her head and glanced at Mu Shuminit with despair and hatred in her eyes. Second Master Mu, Shumin, our Enya has been beaten to such a state, and it's fine if you don't help her. Yet, He was still making sarcastic remarks. I can see that your ability to hit someone when they are down is not small. You're blaming the Mu family with just a few words. Mu Shuminit flew into a rage out of humiliation. If it weren't for your daughter, would the Mu family be so disgraced? I've lived for so long, but I've never been so embarrassed. At the end of the day, isn't it your daughter who brought this upon herself? Why did he have to offend Gu Jinglian of all people? The Mu family hasn't even taken half a step into the Mu family's door, and they've already caused such a big trouble for us. How can they expect the Mu family and the Song family to advance and retreat together? Who was Gu Jinglian? We don't want to offend them. Now that the topic was out in the open, Jiang Qimeng no longer held back and blurted out, "What do you mean by not wanting to offend him? I think you guys just don't dare to offend him." It really proved that statement. Without Mu Yaja, the Mu group is no longer the glorious Mu group of the past. Look at the Mu group now. They have to speak humbly in front of the Gu family. How embarrassing. You. Mu Shuminit wanted to say something, but Mu Linfeng immediately stopped her and reprimanded. At this point, what else is there to say? Yes. Second brother. Chapter 30:14. Mu Shuminit could not quell the hatred in his heart, but due to Mu Linfeng's words, he could only glare hatefully at Jiang Qimeng. The two families had fallen out just like that. Naturally, Jiang Qimeng did not intend to have any interaction with the Mu family. She was also clear that because of this accident, the marriage between the Mus and the Songs was probably off. Therefore, with the mentality of if you don't let me have a good time, I won't let you have a good time either, she naturally did not hold back when she spoke. There's nothing much to say. This Mu family is no longer the Mu family of the past. At least, when Yaja was around, Gu Jinglian wouldn't bully us like this. If Gu Jinglian wanted to flare up, he would have to take Yaja's face into consideration. But now that Yaja is no longer around, this Mu family used to be a lion. Now, it's more like a down-and-out lion king that has been chased out of its tribe. How dare it still want to claim its territory as the king? Forget it. Let's think about how to clean up the mess we've created first. Jiang Qimeng seemed to only be satisfied after shouting these words at the top of her lungs. Little did she know that when Mu Linfeng heard this, he felt a lot of emotions. His blood rushed to his heart and his body swayed a little. These words, however, pierced into the bottom of his heart. These days, there were many people who spoke ill of the Mu family. Jiang Qimeng's words were undoubtedly a critical hit. Mu Yangcheng hurriedly held him. Seeing his uncle's ugly expression, he was even more furious. He shouted at Jiang Qimeng, "Do you think the Song family is any better? Jiang Qimeng, don't be so shameless. Gu Jinglian said that the Song family will become a thing of the past tomorrow. You should think about how you're going to live your life." With that, he supported Mu Linfeng and left. Mu Shuminit also left with his men. The venue was empty in an instant. Jiang Qimeng felt aggrieved, but now that the situation was critical, she could not be bothered to be angry at Mu Yancheng's words. She hurriedly made a call. Half an hour later, the ambulance rushed over and carried everyone into the vehicle. Along the way, the medical staff checked on Song Enya and Song Zhenggua's injuries. Although their injuries were serious, fortunately, their vital signs were stable. Jiang Qimeng was so worried that it was as if the sky was about to collapse. She was in utter despair. If something were to happen to Song Zhenggua, she wouldn't know what to do. They were worried that Song Enya, who had just suffered a miscarriage, would not be able to take it. Fortunately, the medical staff said that her life was not in danger, and they could only confirm it after a series of tests. Her heart was in a state of disarray again. The two were sent to the hospital. Song Zhenggua and Song Enya were sent to the emergency room one after another, leaving Jiang Qimeng waiting outside the operating theater. She didn't have any cash on her, but the moment she entered the hospital and revealed her identity, the hospital immediately said that they would do their best to save her. Jiang Qimeng made a few calls to the Song family's main house. Not long after, Song Jianjun rushed over with his men. At this time, Song Zhenggua had already been pushed out of the operating room and transferred to the intensive care unit. Song Jianjun looked at his brother's appearance. The doctor told him that there were no other injuries, just a severe concussion and a few broken bones in his body. There was no danger to his life. However, at Song Zhengguo's age, the injuries to his muscles and bones would probably take a long time to recover. Chapter 30:15. Worried that something had happened to him, she was so frightened that tears fell from her eyes as she looked at Song Zhengguo, who was lying on the bed on the verge of death. Song Jianjun asked angrily, "Chimeng, don't just cry. Why don't you at least tell me what's going on?" Today was Song Enya's wedding, so Song Jianjun was in the Jun district. He was not present and only sent a red packet because he did not know what had happened. Jiang Chimeng immediately told him everything. When Song Jianjun heard that it was Jiyu Jinglian who had beaten someone up to this state, he was even more shocked. "This? How did you offend someone like Jiyu Jinglian?" Song Jianjun had a deep memory of Jiyu Jinglian's name. It was not for any other reason but because Jiyu Jinglian was probably the first person in history to have led a group of people to smash up the Jun district's courtyard. Back then, a certain second-generation heir from the Jun district's courtyard had somehow run over to the Jiyu family's gambling den to gamble and ended up with a huge debt. However, this fellow was probably full of himself and did not think much of the Jiyu family because of his background. At that time, the Jiyu family had a change of dynasty, and Jiyu Jinglian had just ascended to the throne. He thought that even if he offended this inexperienced calf, it wouldn't cause much of a stir. However, this fellow did not gloat for long. The next day, Jiyu Jinglian sent people with dozens of men to smash his house's courtyard into smithereens. Jiyu Jinglian's methods were surprisingly ruthless. Apart from the living, everything that could be formed in the house was smashed. He threatened to break his limbs if he did not return the money within 3 days. That young master was finally scared out of his wits. He scraped together the money and returned it. The Jiyu family sent word that he had only returned the principal and had not paid off the interest. A few years had passed since the incident, but this pitiful young master was still gritting his teeth to repay the interest. This loan shark's interest had accumulated from millions to tens of millions, and then to hundreds of millions. No matter what, after rounding it up, he still owed a few million. Therefore, Jiyu Jinglian's name left a deep impression on Song Jianjun. He could not help but be on tenterhooks. He discussed with his wife whether they should send Song Zhengguo and Song Enya overseas for medical treatment. Jiang Chimeng, however, refused. Song Zhengguo was a mayor, after all. No matter how arrogant the Jiyu family was, they would not be so arrogant, right? Sending them overseas for medical treatment, in the eyes of outsiders, was no different from a stray dog. The Song family had already been humiliated enough. Jiang Chimeng only took Jiyu Jinglian's words as a threat. There was no need to take them seriously. Unfortunately, not long after she finished speaking, Song Enya came out of the emergency room. The doctor was still informing her of her injuries, saying that the Missy had suffered a severe concussion, multiple rib fractures, soft tissue damage, and spinal trauma, when the Jiyu family's men arrived at the hospital. The moment the Gus men arrived at the hospital, they split into 2 groups and smashed the front desk without a word. They even threatened to destroy the entire inpatient building if Song Enya and Song Zhengguo were allowed to stay in the hospital. And they did not show any mercy. They were definitely not joking. Jiyu Jinglian said that the Song family would bear all the losses. The director was in a meeting in the city. When he heard that there was a situation in the hospital, he did not think much of it. It was not until his subordinates said that the hospital was about to be smashed that he rushed back. Chapter 30:16. All he saw were men in black suits surrounding the entrance of the hospital. The huge road was filled with rows of black cars, which made the road extremely congested. There was no traffic. The passers-by were baffled and frightened by the imposing aura at the entrance. The Jiyu family's behavior and actions still retained the arrogant style of a gangster. In order to achieve their goals, they would do anything and even blow things up. When the hospital director rushed to the hospital, a small leader of the Jiyu family appeared and pointed at his face, cursing that if the hospital did not chase the Songs out, he would immediately smash the hospital. Call the police. Was there any use in calling the police? Even the police were smashed. Outside the road, the police were maintaining order by the roadside, but they ignored the Jiyu family. The hospital director had no choice but to run to the intensive care unit and politely ask Jiang Qimeng to take them away. Jiang Qimeng found it unbelievable. Song Zhanghua and Song Enya were still receiving blood transfusions, and their oxygen tubes were still connected. How could they just pack up and leave? That was too unreasonable. Hence, the Song family and the hospital got into a conflict. In the 10 minutes of this dispute, the Jiyu family majestically smashed the emergency room again. The emergency room was filled with rescue equipment that cost millions. The hospital director's heart ached so much that his liver twitched. He was the hospital director, but this hospital was not his. Once this loss of millions was caused, it would be his responsibility. Seeing that the Jiyu family was serious, the hospital did not show any mercy. They practically chased Jiang Qimeng out of the hospital. Song Zhanghua and Song Enya were still lying in bed when they were chased out. Song Enya had lost too much blood and was in urgent need of a blood transfusion. Song Jianjun suggested that they go to the hospital in Zhengku. This hospital was backed by Zhengku. No matter how powerful Jiyu Jinglian was, he would not go so far as to smash that hospital. Jiang Qimeng was also anxious. In a desperate situation, she tried anything. Hence, Song Jianjun used his connections to call for a car and immediately transferred them to the hospital. By the time they were transferred to the hospital, it was already night. The Jiyu family did not come looking for trouble. It was so thrilling that Jiang Qimeng, who was exhausted and disheveled, fell asleep on the chair in the ward. Song Jianjun was worried that there would be another accident, so he sent someone to guard the hospital and went back. That night was peaceful. Early the next morning, when Jiyu Jinglian found out that Song Jianjun had arranged for Jiang Qimeng to be transferred to this hospital, the Jiyu family came knocking on his door with great force. Crackle! The entire foyer had been smashed up by the Jiyu family's people. Jiang Qimeng was still drowsy when she heard a nurse running into the ward in a panic. Song Zhanghua was in the same ward as Song Enya. She walked over and pulled out the needles for blood and 4 drips without a word. Jiang Qimeng still did not know what was going on. When she saw her mother pulling out the needle, she rushed forward anxiously and questioned her why she was doing this. The nurse said angrily, "Someone is smashing up the hospital. It's said that the Jiyu family sent someone here, saying that they want our hospital to chase you out. Otherwise, I'll smash the entire hospital. He dares. This hospital was backed by the central government. How dare he smash it? Did Jiyu Jinglian eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts? Had the Jiyu family's power reached such an extent? Impossible." Chapter 30:17. With Song Jianjun's support, Jiang Qimeng asked, "Do you know who's lying on this bed?" The nurse glanced at Song Zhanghua and said angrily, "I know. It's written on the nameplate, Song Zhanghua." Then, "Do you know who arranged for us to stay in this hospital?" "It's Chief Song." "Since you know, the hospital has already reported to Chief Song." "I did this because Chief Song instructed me to do so," the nurse said confidently. Jiang Qimeng was shocked when she heard this. "What? We've already called Chief Song. Chief Song has also approved of this decision." After a pause, the nurse said nervously, "Can you not make things difficult for us? I heard that the hospital you were in yesterday was smashed by the Jiyu family. They destroyed several million worth of equipment. Everyone in the hospital is saying that you're a jinx. Wherever you go, the Jiyu family will destroy everything. No hospital will dare to take you in anymore." Jiang Qimeng was stunned for a long time. When the nurse continued to pull, she immediately stopped her. "My daughter is still in critical condition. She's still receiving a blood transfusion. You can't pull it out. Chief Song has already spoken. The director can't just stand by and watch the hospital be smashed into a mess because of you. The hospital is a place to save the dying and heal the injured. How can we just stand by and watch people die? You don't understand." However, the nurse was a snob. With the hospital's support, she ignored Jiang Qimeng's objections and called over a few male doctors. Together, they pushed the bed out of the hospital. When the Jiyu family saw that they had been chased out, they immediately retreated. Jiang Qimeng was furious. This Jiyu Jinglian was forcing her into a corner. She called Song Jianjun. On the other end, The latter said helplessly that he had no choice but to send a car to send Song Zhanghua and Song Enya home. Jiang Qimeng originally thought that this was the end of Jiyu Jinglian. She did not expect that with Jiyu Jinglian's character, he would definitely not stop once he was angered to the point of death. This man had always returned kindness tenfold and enmity 100-fold. If he was displeased, he would return it 100 times, 1,000 times over. As soon as the car arrived at the entrance, Jiang Qimeng didn't have time to send Song Yunxian home before she saw cars from the prosecutor's office parked in front of the Song family's gate. Jiang Qimeng had met him once before and greeted him at a dinner party. He was Shun Yanfei from the capital's Discipline Inspection Commission. Her mind went blank. She was so frightened that she immediately walked forward and asked, "Chief Shun, what are you?" "Mrs. Song, I received an anonymous report that Mr. Song was a pervert. We're here to understand the situation. Were they going to raid the Song family?" Jiang Qimeng laughed in anger and questioned, "Who reported the corruption? Do you have any evidence?" Shun Yanfei gave a fake smile and said coldly, "The informant provided conclusive evidence. Otherwise, we wouldn't have mobilized so many people, don't you think?" Haha. His tone was extremely cold, as if he was deliberately drawing a line between himself and the Song family. Here comes another person who is adding insult to injury. But this was the way of the world. Chapter 3018. Jiang Qimeng could not stop them at all. Once Shun Yanfei gave the order, the subordinates around him immediately understood and rushed into the courtyard in a single file. "Shun Yanfei." Jiang Qimeng rushed forward and grabbed his arm, shouting at the top of her lungs, "You can't do this." Shun Yanfei said in a neutral tone, "Mrs. Song, please open the door and cooperate with our investigation." Jiang Qimeng was so angry that her lips trembled. With a livid face, she said, "Zhanghua and Enya are seriously injured now. Shun Yanfei, Zhanghua used to take care of you so much and supported you in your career. Now, you're finally on a meteoric rise. Now that you've turned around, you're going to turn your back on me? Don't forget. Who exactly did you rely on to climb to this position? Now that you're in a position, you're going to be ungrateful?" Her every word was a gem, but Shun Yanfei was indifferent. His tone could not help but become harsher. "I asked you to open the door. Why are you talking about these irrelevant things? Indeed, Mayor Song used to support me a lot. But, since when did Mayor Song have so much power to promote anyone he wanted?" Jiang Qimeng was speechless for a moment. She had dug a hole and jumped into it herself. She was so angry that she did not pay attention to her words. Shun Yanfei looked at her coldly and said expressionlessly, "You're just trying to divert attention and avoid the investigation. Since you're so uncooperative, don't blame us for being rude." With that, he waved his hand and said to his subordinates, "Search the house properly." "Yes." His subordinates immediately broke through the door. The lock on the sturdy door was broken, and a group of people rushed in. As soon as they walked in, they immediately began to search. Jiang Qimeng wanted to rush in, but she was immediately restrained. The Song family's villa was not big, but it was not small either. Jiang Qimeng usually did not ask about Song Zhanghua's work matters, so she did not know everything about him. However, from what she knew, Song Yunxi had embezzled a portion of the public funds for artificial insemination. This sum of money had been deposited in Song Yunxi's bank account, but it disappeared later. Song Zhanghua was very nervous, so he robbed Peter to pay Paul by embezzling another portion of the public funds into this account. Hence, when Song Enya told him that the money had been used to pay for artificial insemination, he nearly had a stroke from anger. Jiang Qimeng also remembered that there was a secret door in the basement that Song Zhanghua had never allowed her to approach. Once, she walked to the basement and accidentally pushed open the door. When she walked in, she found that it was filled with large safes, and each of them had a combination lock. She vaguely guessed what was inside. She had a tacit understanding with Song Zhanghua, but she didn't point it out. She knew very well in her heart how the Song family was able to obtain such wealth. Jiang Qimeng had always accepted it with a clear conscience and did not think about the consequences if these things were to be exposed. She could only stand at the door and watch as people kept coming in and out. For a moment, her heart was in a mess. But how could she not know? With accidents happening one after another, she naturally knew who was the one behind this sudden search operation. Jiyu Jinglian. Him again. Chapter 30:19. Could it be that this man would not rest until he had forced the Song family into a corner? Now, however, Song Jianjun seemed to be deliberately avoiding suspicion and did not care about them. Song Zhanghua was lying unconscious in bed, and Song Enya was in danger. Who could she pin her hopes on? No. There was only utter despair. The search lasted for a full 6 hours. In the evening, the investigation came to an end. She did not know who Shen Yanfei's subordinates were, but they actually dug 3 feet into the ground of the huge villa. His subordinate came to report that they had found a lot of things and had already made a list for him to look through. Shen Yanfei walked into the living room and found a safe and a number of gold bars moved to the center of the empty space. His subordinate reported that the murals on the wall could be moved. When they were moved, they found a secret door. When the secret door was opened, they found the gold bars and cash hidden inside. In the bookcase, some of the books were hollowed out from the center, and there were a few passbooks and bank cards hidden in them. After some investigation, it was found that these accounts added up to hundreds of millions of yuan in savings. Hundreds of millions. The bank's back-end investigation found that the origin of this money was unknown. A portion of it had not been processed, so the bank immediately froze it. All these years, Song Zhanghua had been transferring his assets overseas, including several properties he had bought in America. 2 of them were in San Francisco, which were worth millions of dollars, and 3 seaside villas in Florida, which were worth tens of millions. There were also some scattered assets that had yet to be cleared. The court sent people to transfer these assets and put a seal on the villa. Song Zhanghua and Song Enya were taken to the hospital by law enforcement officers and detained. Seeing that the situation was not good, Jiang Qimeng could not care about Song Enya and Song Zhanghua anymore. Taking advantage of the fact that Shen Yanfei was not paying attention, she hurriedly took a taxi and left. She found out the address of the Jiyu residence and went all the way there. When she reached the door, she frantically knocked on the door, begging to see Jiyu Jinglian. No one in the Jiyu family paid her any attention and did not let her in. For the whole night, she knelt in front of the Jiyu Jinglian's door, begging him for a look. When Uncle Fu came to report, Jiyu Jinglian was playing Gamoku with Xiao Bao in the study. After what had happened at Song Enya's wedding yesterday, Jiyu Jinglian had left a good impression on him. He knew that the man was doing this to support him. Hence, when he returned to the Jiyu residence, the little lad was no longer as cold to him as before. He kept addressing him as uncle and appeared to be very close to him. Jiyu Jinglian, on the other hand, was particularly arrogant. He pushed his face away with a look of disdain. Baby Chu, on the other hand, did not mind and continued to circle around Jiyu Jinglian. He felt that this uncle was pretty good. At least, he took care of him and helped him deal with those bad people who bullied him. He felt that this man was a very reliable backer. He couldn't help but fantasize that if he found his mother and set her up with his uncle, he would be able to call this uncle Dad. He had a father. In fact, Xiao Bao had already acknowledged this man in his heart. However, he had not changed the way he addressed him because he was afraid that his mother would be angry and unhappy. Still, he did not know if his mother would not acknowledge this man. Chapter 30:20. Jiyu Jinglian did not know what the child was thinking. He felt awkward calling him uncle, but when he saw that chubby little face, he felt that it was acceptable to call him uncle. Xiao Bao kept pestering him to play Gamoku, but Jiyu Jinglian did not have the patience to do so. The reason was that Gamoku was too childish. However, during this period of time, the little guy had become obsessed with this game for some reason. It was something that Uncle Fu had taught him. However, when he learned Gamoku, he discovered that this Gamoku was too simple. That was because he played against Uncle Fu. Out of 5 games, Uncle Fu would lose at least 4 games. It was not challenging at all. He kept winning, and the little guy thought that Gamoku was not difficult at all. He believed that he had extraordinary talent in Gamoku and was invincible. Therefore, he wanted to challenge Jiyu Jinglian. However, after just 1 game, Xiao Bao lost in less than 10 games. What the little guy did not know was that Uncle Fu had been giving in to him all this time. Uncle Fu was very good at Go. Gomoku was child's play to him. However, Jiyu Jinglian's Go skills were superior to his. Even a high-level national player would not be able to gain an advantage in front of Jiyu Jinglian, let alone a newbie like Xiao Bao. Jiyu Jinglian would not give in to him. To him, he had a strong desire to win. Whether it was a game or a competition, he wanted to compete for supremacy in everything. Even if the person playing chess with him was a 5-year-old child, his son, Jiyu Jinglian would not give in. After 5 games, Xiao Bao did not gain any advantage. He was completely defeated by his father. His little mouth pouted and his nose wrinkled as if he was about to cry. Uncle Fu did not know whether to laugh or cry as he watched from the side. The father and son played chess together. Although Jiyu Jinglian looked like a mature adult, he was also very childish and willful in certain aspects. Seeing that Xiao Bao was about to cry, Uncle Fu couldn't bear it. He moved closer to Jiyu Jinglian and whispered in his ear, "Old master, at least give in." Jiyu Jinglian asked impatiently, "Why should I give in to him? You're already so old, why are you being so calculative with a child? It wasn't easy for Xiao Bao to learn Gomoku, but you killed him until he lost all his temper. That's too cruel." Jiyu Jinglian asked coldly, "Who's to blame for his stupidity?" Uncle Fu cleared his throat and said, "Ahem. Master, this is your son. Jiyu Jinglian, you gave birth to such a stupid child." Uncle Fu continued to remind him, "But if Xiao Bao is properly trained, he might become smarter." Xiao Bao eavesdropped on them. He put his hands on his hips and said aggrievedly, "I'm not stupid." Jiyu Jinglian frowned and said, "Do you still want to continue?" "I'm not playing anymore." Xiao Bao pushed the chessboard dejectedly and said unhappily, "I'm not playing anymore. This game isn't fun." He was stupid, but he still had the cheek to blame the game for not being fun. Jiyu Jinglian was disgusted. However, Xiao Bao was unwilling to give up. He thought that if he couldn't beat Jiyu Jinglian in Gomoku, what about the other games? He didn't believe that he couldn't beat him in any game. Xiao Bao crossed his arms and thought hard. Suddenly, he thought of something. His eyes lit up and he said to Jiyu Jinglian, "Let's play aeroplane chess." "I'm not free. Get lost." Jiyu Jinglian's words were concise and to the point, his gaze cold. Aeroplane chess. He, the head of the Jiyu family, was actually playing aeroplane chess with a 5-year-old child. Chapter 30:21. When Xiao Bao heard this, he said smugly, "Is it because you know you can't beat me, so you don't dare to play with me?" This was clearly a goading tactic. Uncle Fu thought to himself in a cold sweat. Master would definitely not fall for such a goading tactic. However, he saw Jiyu Jinglian's contemptuous expression. He slammed the table and said, "Bullsh**T. You think I can't beat you?" Xiao Bao immediately said, "Then I'll bring the chessboard over. Beat me again if you can." Jiyu Jinglian said coldly, "Bring it on. Don't cry if you lose." "I won't cry." As Xiao Bao said this, he immediately went back to his room to bring back the aeroplane chess that Uncle Fu had bought for him. Aeroplane chess was made up of 4 colors. There was a picture of an airplane on it, and it could be played by up to 4 people. There was a die in aeroplane chess. When the die was shaken, the number of heads on the die would determine the number of steps one could take until one reached the end point. However, at the beginning, the plane could only leave the starting point and take off when one rolled a 6. The number of steps one could take to reach the end point had to be exactly right in order to win. It was a chess game that relied heavily on luck. Xiao Bao took it over excitedly. He and Jiyu Jinglian each took a color and started playing. Jiyu Jinglian familiarized himself with the rules of the game and found it novel. When he saw that it was a dice game, he couldn't bear to see it. Was this little brat sure he wanted to play a dice game with him? Uncle Fu saw this from the side and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Jiyu Jinglian had spent most of his childhood in casinos. Whenever it involved gambling, whether it was paigao, mahjong, or especially dice, he could roll as many times as he wanted. Uncle Fu thought that Jiyu Jinglian would definitely go easy on him. If Xiao Bao lost and cried, he wouldn't be able to bear it, right? Who would have thought that Jiyu Jinglian would take such a small game so seriously? The moment he came up, he threw a 6. Once he threw a 6, he could continue. Jiyu Jinglian threw 4 sixes in a row, and 4 planes took off. When he saw Baby Chu looking like he was about to cry, he casually threw a number. When Xiao Bao saw that it was finally his turn, he solemnly fiddled with the dice in his palm for a long time. When it landed on the table, it was a 4. His face was filled with despair. He stared at Jiyu Jinglian as he threw 2 sixes and walked a few steps. He felt strange in his heart. How could he casually throw a 6, but he only took off 1 plane after half a day? Xiao Bao was still a little clever. When it was his turn again, he took the dice and began to study it. No matter how he looked at it, there was no problem. He threw the dice again and finally threw a 6. He excitedly took off 1 plane and walked a few more steps. In the next round, Jiyu Jinglian's plane flew over and sent his plane back to the starting point. Xiao Bao looked like he had nothing left to live for. Halfway through the game, he overturned the chessboard and was about to cry. "I'm not playing anymore." Jiyu Jinglian frowned suspiciously. "What's wrong?" "I feel that you're being shameless." Xiao Bao said truthfully, "Why can't you always throw a 6, but I can't?" Jiyu Jinglian said, "I can throw as many as I want. You're destined to lose if you play dice with me." "You're lying." Xiao Bao did not believe him. "Throwing dice depends on luck." "I'm not lying to you." "Okay, then throw a 4 for me to see." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiyu Jinglian lazily rested his chin on his hand and casually picked up the dice. He spun it on the table and landed with a 4. Chapter 3022. Xiao Bao was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their socket. It was unbelievable. It was like magic. Xiao Bao felt that it was amazing, but he was still skeptical. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Jiyu Jinglian's large hand to examine it carefully. He didn't miss a single pattern, but after a careful examination, he didn't find anything strange. For a moment, his mind was full of question marks. "Maybe it's just a coincidence." Xiao Bao said again, "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Try throwing another one." Uncle Fu teased him. "How many dice do you want this time?" "1. Jiyu Jinglian didn't hesitate at all and threw the dice. The dice spun on the table for a long time before finally landing with 1 point facing up. 3. Jiyu Jinglian threw again and accurately hit 3 points. "That's weird." Xiao Bao scratched his head in confusion. He didn't expect Jiyu Jinglian to do this. That was exactly what he was doing. Xiao Bao suddenly asked curiously, "Then if you throw 2 dice, can you get the same number?" Jiyu Jinglian said, "Bring me 2 dice." Uncle Fu immediately rummaged through the cabinets and found 2 dice for him. Together with the one in his hand, there were 3 dice in total. Uncle Fu then brought over a dice cup. Jiyu Jinglian threw the 3 dice into the cup and pinched the dice cup between his 2 slender fingers. He casually played with the dice cup in his hands and suddenly placed it upside down on the table. His handsome eyebrows raised slightly. Xiao Bao glanced at him and saw that he was motioning for him to open the dice cup. Thus, he curiously reached out his small hand and opened the dice cup. He was surprised to find that all 3 dice were exactly 1 point. He was even more bewildered. "Uncle, you're amazing. I'm convinced." Jiyu Jinglian was flattered by his flattery and felt a little smug. He snorted coldly and said, "It's just a small trick. Can you teach me how to play?" Xiao Bao clasped his little fists, his eyes full of yearning. He felt that Jiyu Jinglian's skill was simply too amazing. It was too cool. He could throw as many as he wanted. Could he be one of the legendary mysterious magicians? Jiyu Jinglian said, "Why should I teach you? You're so stupid, you won't be able to learn it. I will learn with an open mind. I'll definitely train hard. No matter how difficult it is, I will definitely learn it." Xiao Bao's eyes were filled with admiration, which made Jiyu Jinglian feel a little better. He even wanted to show off his card skills in front of this little guy, so that this little guy would worship him even more and worship him like a god. Uncle Fu cast a sidelong glance at Jiyu Jinglian. He was a little disgusted. He didn't expect that old master would have such a childish side. He actually took the little guy seriously. However, this kind of master was a little cute. Uncle Fu was looking at them with gratification. Outside the door, a subordinate came to report that Jiang Chimeng was kneeling at the door. They couldn't chase her away and she still had no intention of leaving. Will something happen to her? After all, she's at the Jiyu family's doorstep. It'll be bad luck if something happens to her. What do you mean? Jiang Chimeng is clamoring to see Old Master. Uncle Fu, do you think we should let Old Master take a look at her personally? Uncle Fu walked in front of Jiyu Jinglian and told him about the matter. Jiyu Jinglian said coldly, "Do I have to do this personally? If she refuses to leave, break her legs." Chapter 30:23. Jiyu Jinglian pursed his lips impatiently. He then stood up and said to Xiao Bao, "Be good and wait for me." "Okay." Xiao Bao watched curiously as Jiyu Jinglian and Uncle Fu left. Feeling puzzled, he followed behind them. Jiyu Jinglian and Uncle Fu only realized that it was raining heavily when they reached the door. Jiang Chimeng knelt motionlessly at the door. The pouring rain hit her body and soaked her clothes. Her thin clothes stuck to her body, making her look sickly and lifeless. She had not had a good night's sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Moreover, such a huge incident had happened in the Song family. She was utterly defeated. Jiang Chimeng heard footsteps and immediately looked up. Once she saw that it was Jiyu Jinglian, a flattering smile immediately appeared on her face. "Young Master Jiyu, you're finally willing to see me." Jiyu Jinglian frowned in disgust at her sorry state and said coldly, "What are you doing?" "Young Master Jiyu, I'm begging you. Please let the Song family off. I don't know what Enya did to offend you. However, if Enya has really offended you in any way, I'll kowtow to you on her behalf and apologize to you since she's still young and immature. But I beg you to let the Song family off. Zhanghua is seriously injured and Enya is half dead. Isn't this punishment enough?" Jiyu Jinglian said expressionlessly, "Don't say such nonsense. Get lost or I'll break your legs." With that, he turned to leave. Jiang Chimeng turned pale with fright and immediately pounced on him. She hugged his slender legs and refused to let go. Jiyu Jinglian's gaze was furious. He turned around and said coldly, "Let go. Young Master Jiyu, I'm begging you. The Song family is finished. If this is punishment, then isn't it enough? How are you going to pressure the Song family? Do you really want to force the Song family into a dead end before you stop?" Jiang Chimeng broke down and cried hysterically, "Let people off whenever possible, right? Young Master Jiyu, let the Song family off. Get lost." Jiyu Jinglian kicked her away. Jiang Chimeng flew out like a paper kite with a broken string. She hit the door and fell on the steps. That kick happened to land on her chest. She clutched her chest and coughed pathetically as if she was going to cough her lungs out. Jiyu said contemptuously, "I can let the Song family off, but you have to die. How about that?" "What? Didn't you say that you wanted to apologize on behalf of your daughter?" Jiyu Jinglian said expressionlessly, "Then pay with your life." When Jiang Chimeng heard this, her eyes widened as she looked at him in disbelief. She could not believe that there was such a cruel man in this world. "Jiyu, don't you go too far." As Jiang Chimeng spoke, she suddenly saw a thin figure hiding at the door not far away. Chapter 30:24. From now on, we'll stay out of each other's business. If you don't agree, then I'll take this child down with me. Jiang Chimeng had obviously chosen to do this because she was in despair. On the way here, she had specially bought a dagger. If Jiyu Jinglian was determined to kill her, then she didn't mind taking Jiyu Jinglian down with her. She had originally prepared this dagger for Jiyu Jinglian. However, when she saw this child, she recognized him at a glance. This was the child that Jiyu Jinglian held in his arms at the wedding. She realized that Jiyu Jinglian treated this child differently. Although this child kept calling him uncle, she realized that Jiyu Jinglian doted on this boy very much. She couldn't help but wonder how this child was related to Jiyu Jinglian. Could he be an illegitimate child? Jiyu Jinglian had never married. Many socialites in the capital yearned for Jiyu Jinglian's young, handsome, and high status. However, they were also wary of Jiyu Jinglian's unpredictable temperament. There were very few families that were on good terms with the Jiyu family. Most of them coveted Jiyu Jinglian's ruthless methods and were in awe of him. However, Jiyu Jinglian had a woman before. Therefore, Jiang Qimeng suspected that this child was Jiyu Jinglian's illegitimate child. Xiao Bao was quite frightened by this sudden battle. His entire body froze and he didn't dare to move. With the cold dagger pressed against his neck, he didn't even dare to make a sound as he looked at Jiyu Jinglian anxiously. However, for some reason, even though he was in imminent danger, he still wasn't too nervous. He subconsciously believed that this insufferably arrogant man would never allow him to be in danger. This was probably trust. He believed that this man wouldn't let him be in danger. When Jiyu Jinglian saw that Xiao Bao had fallen into Jiang Qimeng's hands, his eyes finally regained some focus and a trace of nervousness appeared. He reprimanded Uncle Fu and said, "Why is he here?" Uncle Fu was also at a loss. "Old master, I don't know either. This guy probably followed us out of curiosity." Jiyu Jinglian was a little anxious. This guy always made him worry. The subordinates at the side were also stunned and did not dare to act rashly. They knew very well that this child was not ordinary to Jiyu Jinglian. They were afraid that Jiang Qimeng would really hurt the child, so they stood rooted to the ground and waited for orders. He raged, "Jiang Qimeng, don't test my limits. Let him go. Bottom line." So the great young master Jiyu also has a bottom line? Jiang Qimeng was even more certain that this child had a special place in his heart. She tightened her grip on the child and glared at him. "As long as you let the Song family off, I won't make things difficult for this child. Are you negotiating with me?" Jiyu Jinglian sneered. "What right do you have to bargain with me? If you don't want to die a horrible death, let the child go." Uncle Fu was frightened when he heard this. He immediately tugged at Jiyu Jinglian's sleeve and said gloomily, "Old master, this child is still in someone's hands. You've angered Jiang Qimeng by saying these words. Aren't you afraid that she will really die together with Xiao Bao in a fit of anger?" "She wouldn't dare," Jiyu Jinglian said fiercely. "If she dares to touch a single strand of hair on his head, I'll cut off her flesh piece by piece." Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one doubted that Jiyu Jinglian's words were just a threat. Given his character, if he dared to say such a thing, he would dare to do it. Song Enya was a classic example. Chapter 30-25. Hence, the little one said to Jiang Qimeng sympathetically, "Auntie, can you let me go? Otherwise, you'll really be in trouble." Jiang Qimeng was speechless. Xiao Bao seemed to pity her and said, "This uncle not only kills people without batting an eyelid, but his methods are also very terrifying. Don't misunderstand. I have nothing to do with him and I'm not that important to him. Don't take things too hard and use me to threaten him. It's useless. You'll only die a worse death." Uncle Fu was confused. He didn't know how this little one came up with, but he actually managed to scare Jiang Qimeng into a daze. He even managed to make this tense situation disappear. Jiang Qimeng screamed, "Shut up." Jiyu Jinglian said, "Jiang Qimeng, do you think you can threaten me with this child? I'll give you 3 seconds to let him go." Jiyu Jinglian, "Do you think I'll believe your nonsense again? Or else?" Jiyu Jinglian interrupted her. "1. You, 2. Jiang Qimeng was inexplicably frightened and stumbled backward. Jiyu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and counted to 3. There was a bang and a gunshot. A bullet pierced through the air and pierced through her shoulder. Jiang Qimeng was in so much pain that she subconsciously loosened her grip and the dagger fell to the ground. Xiao Bao immediately broke free from her grip and jumped down from her arms. He didn't forget to stomp on her foot before nimbly running toward Jiyu Jinglian. Behind him, Jiang Qimeng immediately got up, grabbed the dagger on the ground, and stabbed it toward Xiao Bao's back. Uncle Fu was so shocked that he opened his mouth. Before he could exclaim, Jiyu Jinglian suddenly rushed forward, hugged Xiao Bao in his arms, and threw a clean flying kick. However, Jiang Qimeng held the dagger and fiercely swung it at him. In the blink of an eye, Jiyu Jinglian kicked Jiang Qimeng's shoulder hard and sent her flying. Jiyu Jinglian's arm was caught off guard as he was protecting Xiao Bao and was cut by her dagger. Jiyu Jinglian didn't notice that he was injured, but Xiao Bao's sharp eyes noticed that his clothes were stained with blood and torn. He seemed to be injured. He said fearfully, "Uncle, you're injured." He felt guilty and worried at the same time. Uncle Fu rushed over and took the child from Jiyu Jinglian. He was also shocked when he noticed the abnormality in his arm. "Old master, you're injured. Let me take a look." "Where are you injured?" Jiyu Jinglian would never put himself in danger easily, but this was the first time in his life that he was injured because of this child. Jiyu Jinglian pushed him away and turned to look at Jiang Chimeng. He said coldly, "You're courting death." After saying that, he walked forward, grabbed her by the throat, and lifted her up. Even though his arm was injured, he was still very strong. Jiang Chimeng's feet were suspended in the air. Her neck was in his hand, and the sound of her joints dislocating kept coming out. She hugged his arm tightly and kicked her legs. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her entire face was flushed red. She was almost suffocating. "No. No. Don't. Don't kill." Jiang Chimeng said a few words with difficulty, her eyes filled with pain and despair. Jiyu Jinglian was indifferent and tightened his grip on her throat. Xiao Bao saw this scene and was frightened. He immediately said, "Uncle, stop." Chapter 30:26. As Xiao Bao spoke, he glanced at Jiang Chimeng, who was lying on the ground in a sorry state. He could not bear to see her like this. She looks so pitiful. Furthermore, if you kill someone, it will only dirty your hands. Jiyu Jinglian frowned. He could not help but wonder if this little guy was his biological son. Why was he so soft-hearted? Had he forgotten that it was this pitiful woman who had used her dirty hand to strangle his neck and even pressed a dagger against his neck? Uncle Fu also said, "Old master, don't dirty your hands. Leave this kind of person to me." Then, he whispered into Jiyu Jinglian's ear, "You have to be more careful in front of the child. Otherwise, you will scare the child." Xiao Bao is only 5 years old. Jiyu Jinglian felt that it made sense. He nodded slightly and said, "I'll leave it to you." Uncle Fu nodded. Jiyu Jinglian carried Xiao Bao and returned to the room. After the thrilling scene just now, the two of them were in a sorry state. They were drenched from head to toe. Just as Jiyu Jinglian returned to the room, Xiao Bao hurriedly left his arms and started rummaging through the cabinets. "What are you looking for?" Xiao Bao could not be bothered to speak. Finally, he found a first aid kit in the cabinet. He was observant. A few days ago, Uncle Fu had accidentally injured his finger and used a band-aid, so he put the first aid kit here. He carried the first aid kit to Jiyu Jinglian and said carefully, "Uncle, your arm is injured. Let me help you apply the medicine." Jiyu Jinglian looked at him suspiciously. Why was this guy trying to curry favor for no reason? He said, "There's no need. I can do it myself. You can't bandage it as well as I can," Xiao Bao said as he pushed him to sit on the sofa. He emphasized, "You just have to sit down. Leave the rest to me." Jiyu Jinglian looked at him with disdain and questioned, "Can you do it?" "Of course. Mother often gets injured, so I'm the one who takes care of her wounds. Uncle, you have to believe in my ability." As he spoke, Xiao Bao rolled up Jiyu Jinglian's sleeve. There was a knife wound on his arm. Fortunately, the wound was not deep and did not even require stitches. He only needed to clean the wound and bandage it to stop the bleeding. Jiyu Jinglian simply leaned against the sofa and closed his eyes, leaving the little guy to his own devices. Xiao Bao opened the first aid kit and rolled up his sleeves. Then, he used a pair of tweezers to carefully pick up an alcohol swab and wanted to apply it to his wound. Unexpectedly, his hand was too small, and the tweezers were a little too big. Unexpectedly, the alcohol cotton was not clamped, and the sharp tip of the tweezers poked the wound. Jiyu Jinglian. He abruptly opened his eyes and glared fiercely at little treasure. What's going on? Even if it was alcohol, it shouldn't be so painful. Xiao Bao felt a little guilty and retracted the tweezers. Fortunately, Jiyu Jinglian did not see it. He laughed and said, "Uncle, so you're afraid of pain too?" Jiyu Jinglian's lips twitched and he snorted coldly. "How is that possible?" He frowned and was suspicious again. "If you don't know how to do it, I'll do it myself." "Aya, I didn't do well just now. It's all your fault for moving around." Jiyu Jinglian. His face was full of question marks. When did he move around? This kid was blaming others for his own incompetence. Chapter 30:27. Jiyu Jinglian tolerated it and was rather patient. Xiao Bao was more attentive this time. He carefully cleaned his wound, then applied some medicine and bandaged it with gauze. It's done. Xiao Bao was elated. Jiyu Jinglian opened his eyes and saw that his arm was wrapped very thickly with gauze. After that, he even tied a bow. It was very girlish. Such a thick bandage made people think that his arm was broken. Jiyu Jinglian's face was ashen. Is this what you mean by having enough experience? Is there a problem? Jiyu Jinglian said coldly, I only scratched the skin. My bones are not broken. I was afraid that your wound would hurt if it hit something hard, like the corner of a table. It won't hurt if the bandage is thicker. Xiao Bao explained very considerately. Jiyu Jinglian was speechless again. When Uncle Fu walked in and saw Jiyu Jinglian's arm wrapped like a dumpling, his face immediately changed colors. He shriveled for a long time and then laughed loudly without giving face. Old master, is your arm broken? No. Jiyu Jinglian was even angrier. If you laugh again, I'll pull out your tongue. Oh. Uncle Fu was so frightened that he quickly covered his mouth and stopped laughing. Xiao Bao was a little frustrated. His little face wrinkled and he asked sadly, Is my bandage that ugly? Chimph, what do you think? Jiyu Jinglian kicked his butt. Go to sleep. A dog biting a green bean cake. You don't know how to be kind. Xiao Bao muttered as he went back to his room. Jiyu Jinglian and Uncle Fu looked at each other and suddenly asked tacitly, What's a green bean cake? Uncle Fu asked, Old master, do you need me to bandage it again? No need. Jiyu Jinglian said awkwardly, It's troublesome. With that, he got up and returned to his room. Uncle Fu snickered behind his back. This old master really didn't mean what he said. How was it that he was afraid of trouble? It was that he couldn't bear to tear it down. Even though he disliked it, it was still his own son who had bandaged his wound. The next day, the news reported the news of Song Zhengguo's downfall. The disciplinary committee found a lot of cash and gold bars of unknown origin in the Song residence. They even found out that Song Zhengguo had bought overseas. In addition, Song Yunxi was also taken away for investigation. It was said that Song Jianjun was spared because he was the one who exposed Song Zhengguo's other hidden assets. This was clearly an act of abandoning the pawn to save the general, to save one's own life. Once this news was announced, the whole city was shocked. Song Zhengguo was the mayor of Beijing. In front of the public, he had always presented himself as a clean and honest man. However, no one would have thought that he had embezzled such a large amount of grey assets. After the final liquidation by the disciplinary commission, the total amount was more than 1 billion. Among them, there was also Song Zhengguo's unknown investment fund. In addition, Jiang Qimeng was also taken away for investigation. This matter caused a huge uproar and even alarmed the higher-ups. Song Zhengguo caused a series of butterfly effects. It was said that following his connections, other people were also uprooted. Beijing's government experienced a big reshuffle overnight. Another report also caught the attention of the public. Chapter 30:28. It was rumored that the Song family had offended the Jiyu family, and that the Jiyu family was the one behind all this. However, there were also people who said that the Jiyu family had only collected relevant evidence. If Song Zhengguo had not done such a thing, the Jiyu family would not have made up something out of nothing to deal with the Song family. Song Zhengguo's case was still under investigation, and his assets had been seized. As for his trial, it would be held in public at another date. Song Zhengguo could never have imagined that because of his daughter, his career would come to an end like this. He had failed miserably. What he didn't expect even more was that what awaited him was a death sentence with a reprieve. Of course, this was all in the future. During this period of time, Chu Ho had been actively rehabilitating. Under Uncle Fu's meticulous care, her body was getting better, and her complexion had returned to normal. Hence, when she asked to see Xiao Bao again, Uncle Fu did not refuse. In the afternoon, when Xiao Bao came home from kindergarten, Uncle Fu hugged him and said mysteriously, "Xiao Bao, Uncle Fu will take you to see someone, okay?" Xiao Bao was curious. Who is it? Don't worry, you'll know when you see him later. Uncle Fu carried Xiao Bao and walked into Chu Ho's room. When he opened the door, Xiao Bao was still confused. However, when he followed Uncle Fu's line of sight and saw Chu Ho standing in the room, wearing a white shirt and looking uneasy, he was stunned. He was so shocked that he could not speak. Chu Ho was originally calm as she waited anxiously. When Uncle Fu said that he would bring Xiao Bao over, she waited patiently in the room. She was afraid that her reunion with Xiao Bao would be obstructed by Jiyu Jinglian. However, she did not expect that Jiyu Jinglian would not interfere, which surprised her. When she saw Xiao Bao, Chu Ho's eyes reddened. A warm smile immediately appeared on her originally stern face. She immediately walked over and held Xiao Bao's face, looking left and right. Originally, Xiao Bao was very thin, not tall, and there was not much flesh on his face. However, how long had it been? His face had become chubby, and he had grown a lot taller. Chu Ho suddenly had mixed feelings. She hugged him tightly, her eyelashes wet with tears. Xiao Bao. Chu Ho's throat was choked and her voice was a little hoarse. Xiao Bao reacted belatedly. When he first saw her, he thought that he was dreaming. It was only when Chu Ho hugged him tightly and felt the real touch and the warmth of her body that he realized that this was not a dream. This was really happening. Finally, he was reunited with her. His mother was alive and kicking. His mother really existed in reality, and not in a dream. No matter how hard he tried, he could not catch up with her. Mom. Xiao Bao was so emotional that he burst into tears. He cried and hugged Chu Ho, crying until the sky fell and the earth cracked. Xiao Bao thought that he would never see Mom again in this lifetime. Sob, sob, sob. Xiao Bao cried sadly, and Chu Ho's heart ached even more. She took him from Uncle Fu's arms and hugged him, kissing his forehead repeatedly. Mom missed you too. Sob, sob. Mom, why did you only find Xiao Bao now? Xiao Bao felt wronged and disdainful. Mom is so stupid. So stupid, so stupid. When Uncle Fu saw this scene, he couldn't help but be moved. The corners of his eyes were a little wet, and he felt a little touched. Chapter 30-29. Even though Xiao Bao rarely mentioned Chu Ho during this period of time, he knew that the little guy was meticulous. Even though he didn't say it out loud, he was always thinking about Chu Ho in his heart. Hence, he was happy to nurse Chu Ho back to health. He hoped that she could recover quickly so that she could appear in front of the little guy in good health. It would be a surprise for the little guy. To Xiao Bao, this surprise was both surprising and delightful. He could tell that when he saw Chu Ho, he was so emotional that he almost fainted from crying. Uncle Fu was considerate. He quietly left the room and closed the door, giving the mother and son some space. Chu Ho wiped away Xiao Bao's tears and said, "Don't cry, okay? Didn't Mommy find you?" Humph. Xiao Bao was still a little angry. However, he couldn't hold it in for long. In the blink of an eye, he smiled warmly again. Chu Ho pinched his face affectionately and said to him, "Xiao Bao, Mommy will take you away from here, okay?" When Xiao Bao heard this, he was startled. He didn't immediately nod in agreement. Instead, he grabbed her collar uneasily and said hesitantly, "Mommy, Xiao Bao has a question to ask you." Chu Ho paused for a moment and said, "Okay, go ahead." She vaguely realized that what he was going to ask might be a tricky question. Xiao Bao asked Mommy before where Daddy was, but Mommy said that the grass on Daddy's grave was taller than me. But Xiao Bao found Daddy. Xiao Bao blushed and said, "Mommy said that before." Was she lying to Xiao Bao? Chu Ho held her breath and didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know how to answer this question. Xiao Bao asked doubtfully, "Mommy, Xiao Bao has a daddy, right? His name is Jiyu Jinglian, right?" Xiao Bao, must Mommy leave? When Xiao Bao thought about leaving with her, he was afraid that he would never see that handsome and bad uncle again, and his mood became inexplicably complicated. Thus, he probed carefully, "Can't Mom stay?" With his father, Xiao Bao would have a mother and a father. Mommy won't be alone anymore. Chu Ho did not expect him to make such a request. For a moment, he did not know how to respond. "Xiao Bao, don't you like Mommy anymore?" "I do. Xiao Bao loves mommy the most. Just as Xiao Bao finished speaking, he hesitated for a moment. He changed the topic and said softly, but Xiao Bao likes uncle too. Although that uncle looks fierce like a big iceberg and doesn't seem easy to get close to, Xiao Bao can feel that he likes Xiao Bao too and treats Xiao Bao very well. A few days ago, uncle even taught me a lesson. Bad guys. Baby Chu immediately told her everything that had happened after he was kidnapped by the two men sent by Song Enya, including his encounter with Jiyu Jinglian, as well as what had happened in the Jiyu family during this period of time. He told her everything, big and small. Chu Ho was a little stunned when she heard this. Although she was confused and couldn't make heads or tails of it, there was one thing that Xiao Bao emphasized. Jiyu Jinglian treated him very well. Although he would sometimes threaten him with scary words like "I'll break your legs," Xiao Bao could see how much he doted on him. Chapter 30:30. Quote: at the end of the day, blood ties are a very strange thing. It could bind two people together tightly, and it was the most intimate bond. But it can also mercilessly create an insurmountable gap between them. When I was young, I used to be glad that I had a brother like Dongyu who doted on me. I used to think that I was the happiest girl in the world. When I grew up, I hated that the man I loved so much that I couldn't extricate myself from had the same blood flowing in his veins, along the way, along the way, along the way, along the way, along the way. From ignorant feelings to immature feelings, to a strong desire to be together forever, until we were forcibly separated by the world. How far is forever? In a single thought, eternity is eternal. One wrong thought, and every step will lead to death. Dongyu, do you know that even though the world is so big, I have nowhere to go and no one to rely on? Asterisk 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 whether it's God or anyone else, who can explain to me what love is? If no one can explain it clearly, then why can't I fall in love with Dongyu? This is a question that I still can't solve after leaving home for so long. For so many years, I've been searching for a balance between love and Dongyu, until I received the sudden news of my marriage. Shachuan, let me tell you a piece of good news. Your brother is getting married. When are you coming back for a gathering? Over the phone, my father's voice sounded weathered and uneasy. He chose his words carefully. Come home. Everyone misses you. Your mother and I, and your brother. Everyone misses you. At that moment, my breathing stopped. It was really like a boom. My mind went blank, and there was nothing left. This news, which made the whole family immerse in joy, suddenly threw me into eternal hell. Holding the receiver tightly, I was silent for a long time. Then, I tried my best to suppress my trembling voice and said calmly, "Okay." After hanging up the call, I realized that the back of my hand was already sweaty. Father said, "Come home." But that was home, and yet it wasn't home. I never thought that reality would be so cruel. It was so cruel that one look at heaven and one look at hell. I used to think of him as my entire world, but I didn't expect this warm world to suddenly collapse like a cloud. And it came so suddenly. Asterisk 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 the next day, I booked a flight back to China. I knew that returning home this time was definitely not a wise choice. After drifting alone in a foreign country for a few years, I waited for such news. I thought that even if I had given up, I should be more thorough. Let me see him with my own eyes. If he is really happy, then I should try to let go of this unforgettable relationship. The moment I got off the plane, I felt a lump in my throat. Looking at the crowd in front of me, I felt a stabbing pain in my heart and tears welled up in my eyes. I walked through the crowd with great difficulty, but my footsteps were very slow. Every step I took, I would stop, and from time to time, I would brush past strangers. I still remember that 8 years ago, when I left this city with a heart filled with despair, it was the same scene. These people passed by my world. I don't know their stories, and they don't understand my thoughts. Chapter 30:31. Now that I've set foot on this land again, the city seems to have changed a lot. The airport has been rebuilt, the interior decoration is new, and it looks very stylish. The thick Beijing accent of my hometown filled my ears. It's been a long time since I last heard it, and at the same time, I feel very warm in my heart. I'm back. After 8 years, I'm stepping on this land again. But in my heart, there's a bit of nervousness, But more, there's a deep sadness in my heart. When I left back then, I felt that the future was unfamiliar. But now that I've set foot on this land, I don't feel close. There's a sense of timidity when I'm close to home. Mother has been waiting at the airport for a long time, and she arrived early. She must have specially dressed up after knowing that I'm coming back. After 8 years, when the mother and daughter met again, they didn't hug each other warmly like normal people. They just stood there quietly and looked at each other. There was estrangement in their eyes. I think she must have sadly discovered a flash of indifference in my eyes. From her face, it's not hard to see how much she wants to go forward and hug me tightly. She wants to tell me how much she missed me in the past 8 years as a mother. How she wanted to tell me how worried my family had been about me since I had been away for so long. Maybe she regretted what she did 8 years ago, I thought. But all the words are stuck in my throat under my cold gaze. There are thousands of words, but I can't open my mouth. Mom, I'm back. Amidst the noise, I smiled and broke the awkward silence between us. Mother came back to her senses and forced a smile. She chuckled and muttered, "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Then, she felt a bit awkward. As if to ease the awkwardness, she hurried forward to help me carry my luggage. Out of the corner of my eye, I instinctively dodged her hand. My mother was in a daze, and her hand froze in mid-air. "Mom, I'll do it myself." As I said that, there was no change in my expression. I knew that my cold gaze must have made my mother's heart ache a little, because I saw a flash of pain on her face. I suddenly realized that these 8 years, which was neither a long nor short period of time, seemed to be like a great flood that washed away the dependence and connection between mother and daughter. "Xiaochuan, do you still hate me? 8 years ago. I had no choice but to send you out of the country. I'm doing this for your own good." A smile appeared on my face, but I said nothing. After a long while, I sighed. I know, so you really don't have to explain so much." She gave me another long look. "Xiaochuan, is the luggage heavy? Let Mom do it for you." Her mother's voice was very soft and even trembled slightly. She said carefully, "Let me carry it for you. Xiaochuan, I'll carry your luggage for you, okay?" I was stunned. When I looked up, I saw her frowning slightly. She seemed a little humble now. It was a world of difference from when she had arrogantly chased me out of the country. I pursed my lips and nodded silently, allowing my mother to take the luggage from me. Chapter 30-32. This time, I didn't avoid it. There was some comfort in my mother's eyes. "The city has changed a lot in the years you've been away. Our family has moved too. The piece of land we used to live in has been taken over by the government. When he heard that you were coming back, your father was overjoyed. He didn't sleep well last night. He tossed and turned nervously. He kept saying that he was waiting for you to come back today so that he could cook for you. Look, he bought fresh vegetables early in the morning. He's probably still busy at home." Sitting in the taxi, Motherland smiled and chattered. Gradually, she let go of her worries. I smiled but didn't say anything. My gaze was indifferent through the car window. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." As my mother spoke, in the rearview mirror, the corners of her eyes couldn't help but moisten. However, she secretly wiped away the tears with her fingertips, not wanting me to see. "Mom," I silently looked out the window at the unfamiliar street. My eyelids drooped slightly as I interrupted her indifferently. I asked hesitantly, "Is he all right?" She knew who I was talking about. Hence, she fell silent and the smile on her face gradually faded. "Dongyu, he has always been thinking about you." I vaguely remember that not long after I was born, the first word I could say was brother. The first name I said when I was learning to speak was also his name. Dongyu. For as long as I could remember, the thing that left the deepest impression on me wasn't my mother's gentle whispers, nor my father's broad shoulders, but his warm arms. My name was Yin Xiaochuan. I was born on the hottest day of summer. His name was Yin Dongyu. He was born during the coldest time of winter. He was my brother, 3 years older than me. When I was young, my parents were busy with work and the family of 4 rarely spent time together. When I was born, My mother's heart ached for me and she insisted on giving birth to me. In order to avoid the policy, she fled to the countryside. At that time, the two of us were fostered at my grandmother's house in the countryside, and Dongyu was my greatest support. Dongyu was very good-looking. He had inherited his mother's good looks. He had delicate features and was very handsome, especially his pair of clear black and white eyes. One look at them could make people lose their souls. Hence, many girls had liked Dongyu since he was young. However, perhaps because he was born in winter, Dongyu's personality was a little cold. He had been too distant from the other children since he was young. Even his parents were a little distant from him. This coldness was even more obvious during the rebellious period of his youth. And from the beginning to the end, the only one who could freely get close to him was probably me. Perhaps it was because we were blood-related, but Dongyu doted on me to the bone. Even his parents couldn't compare to this kind of love. According to Grandma, when I was born, Dongyu was still very young. He had thin arms and legs, and there wasn't a single ounce of flesh on his arms. However, he was able to carry me steadily and never fell or knocked my head. At that time, after my mother gave birth, she wasn't in good health. Before I was a month old, she asked Grandma to take care of me. Dongyu, on the other hand, followed her silently. He had never been close to anyone since he was young, but he liked to hug me and play with me, calling my nickname over and over again. Chun Chun, Chun Chun. When I cried, he patiently teased me. When I was hungry, he gently coaxed me. At night, it was Dongyu who hugged me and sang nursery rhymes to sleep. Chapter 30-33. Yes, he really doted on me. I naively thought that even if Dongyu was the only person in the world who doted on me, I would still be the happiest girl in the world. I remembered Grandma mentioning that when I was 1 year old, Dongyu held my little hand and taught me how to walk step by step. He was half-squatting in front of me. At that time, I was chubby from being raised by Grandma. I wore a lot of winter clothes and struggled to walk on my wobbly legs, wobbling towards him with my arms outstretched. In a moment of carelessness, I fell hard. Although it wasn't serious, a layer of skin was abraded on my palm. Before I could cry out loud, Dongyu's eyes turned red. He hugged me in a panic. For the first time in my life, I showed an expression other than gentleness and indifference on his face. As I grew older, I could run more steadily and gradually became sturdier. I played with the other children, playing hide-and-seek and catching cicadas. I was really crazy. When I was young, I loved the nighttime the most. At that time, we were still young and there were no inhibitions. Every night, Grandma would bathe Dongyu. When I was young, I didn't know what shame was. I would climb into the bathtub on all fours and squeeze with him. I especially liked to tease him. I even pointed at Dongyu's undeveloped little guy and asked Grandma why my brother's part was different from mine. Grandma would always laugh at my teasing. She would scratch the bridge of my nose and laugh at me for being shameless. On the contrary, Dongyu would be a little shy. So much so that when I was naked next to him, he would freeze and not dare to move. Grandma would apply the shower gel on us. I liked the refreshing smell very much, and I liked the fact that my body smelled the same as Dongyu's. I was afraid of the dark and didn't like to sleep with Grandma, but I was willing to squeeze into a small bed with Dongyu. At night, I would often wrap my little arms and legs around him without restraint, pestering him to play rock, paper, scissors. This boring game became the most interesting pastime. When the moon was high in the sky, I couldn't sleep. I liked to lie beside him, hold my little head, and listen to him sing and tell stories. Dongyu's voice was very pleasant. It was as clear as a wind chime, with a hint of childishness. He sang gently in my ear. At that time, he only knew how to sing a few songs that he had learned from music class. But I never got tired of listening to him. Every night in my childhood, I always fell asleep with his soft singing. In her memories of her youth, Dongyu was somewhat bland. He always locked himself in that world, either doing his homework or reading some famous works outside of class. He had been taking piano lessons since he was 6, so I often pestered him to teach me. At that time, in the eyes of many children, Dongyu was cold and unapproachable. He was so noble and aloof. Thinking of his background from the city, He was not like these wild children who grew up playing mud and catching frogs in the countryside. His body was clean, and there was a bit of scholarly elegance. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary child could have. Good etiquette and refined speech were used by many parents as teaching materials for their children. Chapter 30-34. It's delicious. I'm asking my daughter. Yoon Shusha had the urge to roll her eyes. Unknowingly, it was getting closer and closer to her due date. Yoon Shusha's tummy was getting bigger and bigger. Perhaps big wasn't enough to describe her round tummy. In Yo-Yo's words, Yoon Shusha's tummy seemed to be hiding a ball. Xiao Ichen innocently fantasized, will there be two little sisters? Yoon Shusha broke out in cold sweat when she heard this. Yo-Yo nodded in agreement. He explained, our family has the genes of twins. Look, Mommy and Uncle are twins, and they gave birth to us. If that's the case, we might even have twins. Xiao Ichen clapped happily. That's great. If that's the case, maybe Mommy has two little sisters in her tummy. This way, you can have one and I can have one. We won't have to fight for it. Yoon Shusha laughed when she heard this. You guys are treating your little sisters like toys. Yo-Yo and Xiao Ichen chuckled. Yoon Shusha couldn't help but pour cold water on them. You guys can give up. There's only one little sister in my tummy. That's what the ultrasound doctor said. So, don't harbor any fantasies that you shouldn't have. Sob. The two little lads wanted to cry but had no tears. In the 9th month of her pregnancy, Yoon Shusha also suffered a lot. At night, she couldn't sleep so well. Because of her lack of appetite, she couldn't eat much for dinner. Mu Yaja would coax her to eat some fruits, but at night, she would be hungry again. She would wake up from hunger, but she wouldn't have any appetite. Sometimes, she wouldn't wake up from hunger, but she would be awakened by cramps in her legs. Her legs were a little swollen, and she couldn't walk properly. Sometimes, when she was lying on the bed, Mu Yaja would massage her legs. It wasn't too hard, but it was enough to relieve her pain. She felt extremely guilty. After all, as the president, managing such a large company was not an easy job. Every day, he rushed to the company early in the morning. After dealing with the affairs, he rushed back. He also had to go for regular prenatal checkups and learn how to take care of children. He was so busy. For her, he was worried sick. She couldn't see, but she could feel it. Compared to the first time she was pregnant, having this man around made her feel that being pregnant was a very happy thing. Gradually, she began to feel sleepy and lazy. She did not like to go for walks anymore. However, Mu Yaja kept a close eye on her. It was inevitable that she would take a walk after dinner every day. The doctor speculated that the due date would be in mid-November. As the due date approached, Mu Yaja could not help but start to feel nervous. After waiting for so long, they had finally entered the due date without incident. The next 20 days were naturally not to be taken lightly. He took care of her even more carefully. When there were still more than 10 days before the due date, he booked a special ward in the obstetrics and gynecology hospital and arranged for her to enter. When Gong Jie found out that Yoon Shusha's due date was approaching, he finished his work and rushed over. He accompanied her in the hospital every day, looking forward to the arrival of the little princess. However, just as the due date was approaching, a small accident happened. On this day, Mu Yaja was at the shareholders' meeting. Minute you received a call from the hospital saying that Yoon Shusha's water broke. Her water broke. Chapter 30-35. Mu Yaja was confused. There were still a few days before the due date, and the doctor said that it wouldn't be brought forward. Only then did he feel at ease and go back to the company to handle his work. But now, someone called to say that the amniotic fluid had broken early. How could it have broken early? He left the company and drove all the way to the hospital. He arrived at the hospital anxiously. Just as he reached the entrance of the delivery room, he happened to see a few doctors walking out. He rushed forward and grabbed the doctor's collar, asking, "Where is she? Has she given birth?" "Chairman Mu, calm down. How can she give birth so soon?" He turned around and realized that there was already a group of people waiting at the door. Gong Jie, Hua Jin, and Xiao Shui had also rushed over when they received the news. Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen stood at the side with a guilty look on their faces, as if they were very guilty. There wasn't enough time to inform the others, and Hua Jin was afraid that it would be inconvenient to have too many people around, so he didn't announce it. The group of people discussed nervously at the entrance of the delivery room. They were worried, but also looking forward to it. Mu Yaja couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He questioned the doctor, "Isn't the due date not here yet? Why did the amniotic fluid break early?" The doctor's lips twitched. He thought to himself, "You have to ask your wife about this." It turned out that Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen were afraid that Yun Shusha would be too bored, so they turned on the television and switched to a talk show. Just listening to a talk show could relieve one's boredom. However, this episode of the talk show was too funny. Yun Shusha listened with great interest. When she heard a joke, she laughed a little too hard and actually broke her amniotic fluid. When the amniotic fluid broke, Gong Jie was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand what was going on. He hurriedly found the doctor, who explained that the amniotic fluid had broken early. Hence, Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen shrank to the side guiltily. Her amniotic fluid had broken, so she could only hurry up and induce labor. Fortunately, the due date was not far away. It was not a big deal, but she had to induce labor. The doctor pushed Yun Shusha into the waiting room. She had just been induced to give birth and did an internal examination. Yun Shusha was in so much pain that she wanted to die. The internal examination was quite painful. Yun Shusha had experienced it once before, but after a few years, she had almost forgotten it. Now that she was going through it again, she immediately regretted it. According to Hua Jin's description, her howls during the internal examination were incomparable to those of a pig being slaughtered. It was said that a woman's temper was at its worst when she was about to give birth. Yun Shusha pointed at him and complained, "Hua Jin, how dare you gloat over my misfortune? How dare you say that my cry is like slaughtering a pig? Wait till I give birth, I won't let you off." The doctor gave her another dose of medicine and said that the cervix had only been dilated by 2 fingers. She had to wait until the cervix was dilated by 10 fingers before she could be officially pushed into the delivery room. As for the internal examination, the doctor used his finger to check the cervix's opening. After the internal examination, Yun Shusha heard a mother-to-be screaming in the delivery room next door. "I want a cesarean section. I want a cesarean section. I don't want a natural birth." Yun Shusha shuddered when she heard it. Although it was not the first time, when she thought about the pain during labor again, she felt a sense of bleakness like a warrior cutting off his wrists. Just as she was feeling uneasy, another pregnant woman was pushed into the waiting room. She was in so much pain that she kept changing her position. One moment, she was kneeling, standing, lying down, and wailing. When Yun Shusha thought about how unbearable the next 10 hours would be, she became even more disheartened. The whole world seemed to have turned dark. Chapter 30-36. Mu Yaja walked into the waiting room and saw Yun Shusha lying on her side on the bed in a strange position. She was hugging her round belly and groaning in pain. Her face was covered in cold sweat, as if she was trying her best to suppress the pain. Seeing her like this, he felt an indescribable pain in his heart. He had looked up a lot of information before, and it was said that it was especially painful for women to give birth. In a woman's life, the pain of giving birth was just like floating cloud. There was an employee in the company who suffered a massive hemorrhage during childbirth. It was so painful that she almost flew to the sky. He walked to the bed and sat down. Yun Shusha turned her head and realized that it was him. She immediately complained, "Mu Yaja, it's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have to suffer like this. It's all your fault." Mu Yaja gave an ungraceful smile, but it was an apologetic one. Yun Shusha felt even more unbalanced. Hearing him laugh, she said gloomily, "What are you laughing at? You still have the cheek to laugh. I'm going to die from the pain." Mu Yaja caressed her cheek, his gaze gentle. Now that she was about to give birth, as a man, he naturally couldn't argue with her at this time. Even if she pointed at him and scolded him, he would accept it. "If scolding me makes you feel better, then go ahead." Yun Shusha was stunned. Another wave of contractions came. It was so painful that the corners of her eyes twitched violently. She narrowed her eyes. When she thought of the grievances and suffering she had suffered for the past 9 months, her anger flared up. Me. I'm not giving birth anymore. Muyaja coaxed her. Okay, I'm not giving birth anymore. I'm serious. I want to go home. If you want to give birth, you give birth. I'm not giving birth. Okay, I'll give birth. Yun Shusha was even angrier. He went along with her words, but she was even more unhappy. She said with tears streaming down her face, I don't want to give birth anymore. It hurts. At this moment, she couldn't care less about being reserved. She wailed, I really don't want to give birth anymore. At this point in time, how could she stop giving birth just because she didn't want to? Muyaja was both angry and amused. He coaxed her gently, bear with it. It'll be over soon. He could understand her anxiety and uneasiness, but although his heart ached for her, he really wanted to bear all her pain for himself, but he was helpless. After all, he was a man and did not have this ability. Standing. Talking while standing is really easy. It's all your fault. Yun Shusha rubbed her belly, feeling wronged. This girl is so troublesome. She's been in my belly for a few days. When she's about to come out, she's so disappointing. She refuses to come out. A nurse passing by said, your cervix has only opened by 2 fingers. Wait a little longer. When it opens by 5 fingers, the rest will be quick. It's painful now because you're having contractions. Bear with it. After saying that, he hurried away. Yun Shusha groaned inwardly. Yet another person who was talking while standing there. Muyaja chuckled softly. He lowered his head and kissed the corner of her lips. He said gently, be good, wifey. When our daughter comes out, I'll help you teach her a lesson and smack her butt. When our daughter comes out, can you bear to do it? As Yun Shusha spoke, she had another strong contraction and another spasm. It was so painful that she almost cried out for her mother. It was fine when it didn't hurt, but when the contractions started, it hurt so much that she wanted to scratch the wall. It was simply killing her. Yun Shusha was in so much pain that she smashed her head against the wall. Muyaja hurriedly protected her and said angrily, what are you doing? Let me faint. It won't hurt if I faint, she said self-righteously. Chapter 30-37. Yesterday, when she passed by the delivery room, she heard the people inside crying and screaming. She was still laughing, but in the blink of an eye, it was her turn. How was this giving birth? This was King killing her. There was a particularly strong contraction, and she was in so much pain that her eyes couldn't move. She groaned on the bed. Muyaja, who was guarding by the side, was even more nervous. Gongjie and the others outside the door were also waiting anxiously. They couldn't enter, so they could only stare at each other. Gongjie, in particular, was so anxious that he called all the people in the gynecology and obstetrics department over. A group of people in white coats came over. After another examination, they said that the cervix had not fully opened. Not fully opened? Gongjie was anxious. He grabbed the doctor's collar and asked, when can I give birth? The doctor was so frightened that he couldn't speak clearly. He explained that everyone's physique was different, so he couldn't make a conclusion. As time dragged on, a few long hours passed. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Yun Shusha was in so much pain that she was about to collapse, but there was no movement. The contractions also became more frequent. Gradually, they went from 1 every 10 minutes to 1 every 3 to 5 minutes. The nurse told her to rest for a while and save her energy. If she really gave birth later, she wouldn't have the energy to give birth. That would be really troublesome. Yun Shusha thought to herself, I want to sleep too, but the problem is that I can't. Muyaja remained patient, silently praying for his daughter to come quickly. He even put his hand on his stomach and said to the little guy in his stomach, Yu Yao, come out quickly. Don't torment your mommy. Yun Shusha gritted her teeth, exasperated. What was the use of this? At night, they did another internal examination. The nurse shook her head and said that it was only 3 fingers. What? After so much time, it was only 3 fingers. Yun Shusha was so angry that she fainted. When she woke up and opened her eyes, Muyaja was still guarding by her side in the waiting room. She didn't know how she fainted. She even suspected that she had fainted from the pain. Xiao Shui, who was outside the door, was also very nervous. At night, they ordered takeout, but no one had the appetite to eat. They all stared at the waiting room in fear, afraid that they would miss even a second. It wasn't until 8 o'clock in the evening that Yun Shisha experienced the strongest wave of contractions. She was in so much pain that she was already in a daze. In her daze, she saw a few nurses coming in and out, and another person came in to do a prenatal checkup. Then, she said excitedly, "The cervix has opened to 7 fingers. You can enter the delivery room now." Then, the nurse asked Mu Yaja, "Sir, are you going to accompany your wife to give birth?" Mu Yaja nodded without hesitation. "Of course. I want to accompany her." "Okay, then come with me to change into sterile clothes." "All right." Mu Yaja turned around and held Yun Shisha's hand tightly. He smiled and said, "Madam, wait for me, okay? I'll be right there." "Okay." Yun Shisha nodded weakly. Mu Yaja turned around and left. A few minutes later, a few nurses walked in and pushed her into the delivery room. Only then did she regain consciousness. However, the cervix was still open. Every minute and every second was a living torture. Chapter 30-38. When Mu Yaja walked in after changing his clothes, he saw her lying on the bed. Because she had struggled, her face was extremely haggard, her hair was disheveled, and her clothes were disheveled. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He walked to her side and held her hand tightly, his heart aching for her. Yun Shisha called out his name in pain. "Mu Yaja, I'm here. Hubby, I'm here. Hubby, I'm in so much pain that I can't take it anymore." Mu Yaja's heart ached terribly. "What do you mean you can't wake up? My wife can do it. I don't want to give birth anymore." Boo-hoo. Yun Shisha was utterly defeated. Mu Yaja's eyes were red with heartache. He turned around and grabbed the nurse. "My wife said she doesn't want to give birth anymore. She's in so much pain. Is there any way?" The nurse said, "Wait a moment." Then she turned around and left. After a while, the nurse came back with a delivery ball. It was about half the height of Yo-Yo's body. It was very elastic and looked like a bigger yoga ball. She said, "Help your wife sit on this ball and weigh it a few times. This will help open the cervix." Mu Yaja nodded and helped Yun Shisha sit on the delivery ball. He supported her body and supported her steadily. If it were in the past, this would be too childish and he would never do it. But now, he was willing to pay any price to help her get rid of her suffering. Yun Shisha was tormented by wave after wave of excruciating pain. This time, the pain wasn't like before. It was as if 2 of her bones were being separated bit by bit. She was in so much pain that she desperately grabbed Mu Yaja's arm. Her other hand was like a cat, desperately scratching whatever she could reach. Mu Yaja looked at her frantic expression and his heart ached so much that he almost suffocated. Especially when he saw that her nails were broken and embedded in her flesh because of her scratching, his heart ached even more. He suddenly stretched out his arm and said, "If it hurts, bite me. Don't torture yourself like this." Yun Shisha hugged his arm, feeling wronged. She opened her mouth and bit him, but she couldn't bear to use force. When the nurses saw this scene, especially when they saw the heartache in Mu Yaja's eyes, they felt warmth in their hearts. Many husbands had accompanied their wives to this delivery room before, but most of them stood there like a block of wood. Among them, there were even some men who were impatient and full of complaints. When dealing with their wives, they did not have anything good to say to comfort them. They only said, "Bear with it. Bear with it." During the delivery, many men were stunned by the scene. Some of them couldn't accept it and ran out. But this man was different. His heart really ached. Gradually, Yun Shisha felt that she couldn't take it anymore and wanted to lie down on the bed. The nurse came over to take a look and said that it was about time, so she helped her lie down on the bed. Lying on the delivery bed, the pain engulfed her all of a sudden. Yun Shisha felt as if she was struggling on the sea and was about to drown. Wave after wave hit her, and the whole world was spinning. Harder, the nurses rushed up and surrounded Yun Shisha nervously. Mu Yaja held her hand tightly by the bed and encouraged her, "Shisha, you can do it. You're almost out." As he said this, He followed the nurse's instructions and stuffed a piece of chocolate into her mouth. Chapter 3039. At midnight, after 4 hours of torment in the delivery room, Gong Jie and the two little fellows were pacing around anxiously outside the door when they heard a long and crisp cry coming from the delivery room. Gong Jie was so shocked that he rushed to the door and looked inside excitedly. Soon, a nurse walked to the door and said with relief, "It's done. It's done. Mother and daughter are safe. Mother and daughter are safe. Wow. Sister is out." The Mu family's beloved little princess had finally arrived in this world under everyone's anticipation. Gong Jie was so excited when he heard this that he immediately hugged Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen. He was as happy as a child. Yo-Yo was overjoyed. Uncle's beloved niece is finally here. Uncle has been waiting for a long time, but it's not in vain. When Yun Shusha was pregnant, Gong Jie often video called her across the ocean. He was also having fun. Like Mu Yaja, he said to her stomach in all seriousness, "Yu Yao, it's uncle. We'll be able to see each other in a few months. Uncle will be waiting for you." Therefore, when he knew that Yun Shusha was about to give birth, Gong Jie immediately flew over. Unfortunately, Yun Yecheng could not be present at such an important moment. He could not walk and could not leave the breathing mask. Therefore, it would be difficult for him to see this scene with his own eyes. Xiao Shui was also very excited. She hugged Hua Jin without reservation and laughed heartily. Hua Jin waited silently at the door for a long time. He finally heaved a sigh of relief when he learned that the mother and daughter were safe. "Oh my! It's a little princess. She's so beautiful." The nurse carried the baby, wiped his body clean, pressed his footprints, and weighed him. After a series of examinations, the baby was very healthy. He opened his two chubby little paws and cried loudly. His voice was clear and loud. She was placed in a swaddle and carried to the man who was waiting by the bed. After giving birth, Yun Shusha was exhausted. Her clothes were wet with sweat. Mu Yaja's heart ached for her. He kept kissing her and smiling, but his eyes couldn't help but become wet and red. "Shusha, I love you." He kept kissing her, but he didn't get tired of it. Yun Shusha didn't have the strength to respond, but she heard his mellow voice choking with emotion. Her nose was also a little sore. "I love you too." Mu Yaja sighed in his heart. Gestation is such a miraculous thing. He had once again created a cute little life with her. Unlike her first pregnancy, this time, he had been by her side the entire time. And the most fortunate thing was that he had witnessed this moment with his own eyes. Thank God. Mother and daughter are safe. "Sir, look, your daughter is so beautiful. He was just born, but he has a head of shiny black hair." Mu Yaja immediately and carefully took the child from the nurse's arms. He finally saw the little guy who had been in her stomach for more than 9 months. His expression was a little sincere and solemn, and even a little nervous. Although he usually looked like he was strategizing and always had a calm and composed face, when he carried the child, he was a little flustered, afraid that he wouldn't hold it well, until a magical scene happened. For some reason, the child stopped crying when she was in his arms. Chapter 3040. Just like Xiao Chen, the newborn baby's face was red and wrinkled. The nurse said it was pretty, but he thought it was ugly. However, he knew that the baby had just been born and hadn't grown up yet. Just by looking at the baby's eyes, he knew that it would be very beautiful when it grew up. Like Xiao Chen and also like Yo-Yo. However, the baby suddenly stopped crying. He looked up nervously and asked, "Why did she stop crying?" The nurse smiled and said, "This is the first time we've seen it. She was crying so much when she was in our arms. Why did she stop crying when she was in your arms? Maybe the father and daughter have telepathy." "Don't worry, sir. We've done a checkup. The baby is very healthy." Mu Yaja's heart finally calmed down. It was a good thing that the baby was healthy. The more he looked at the chubby little angel in his arms, the more satisfied he felt. There was a doting smile in the corners of his eyes, and his expression relaxed a little. As he smiled, the baby's lips curled up slightly as if she was smiling. He was surprised, so he carried the baby to Yun Shusha and said gently, "Honey, look, Yu Yaro is smiling." Yun Shusha held onto the railing of the delivery bed weakly and sat up slightly. Suddenly, she smiled weakly and said, I can't see. Muyaja felt a little upset when he heard that. Can I touch her? The nurse said, yes, you can. She reached out and touched the baby's lips. She was surprised when she touched the baby's lips. Hey! She's really smiling. Muyaja was worried that she wouldn't have the strength to sit up properly, so he carried the baby closer to her so that she could get closer to the baby. Yun Shusha's heart suddenly surged. When she first found out that she was pregnant, she was a little taken aback. She thought that having Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen around was enough to cause a ruckus. But when she saw this little guy with her own eyes, her heart was filled with endless emotions, and the corners of her eyes couldn't help but become moist. She suddenly felt that the pain she had suffered just now wasn't in vain. If her child could be born healthy, all the suffering she had suffered would be worth it. So cute. Her maternal instincts were stimulated to the extreme as she reached out to carry the child. Muyaja carefully watched over her and realized that, although she was exhausted, she was still able to hold the child steadily. This was probably the power of motherhood. Yuyao, you're finally here. Daddy and Mommy have been waiting for you for a long time, Yun Shusha said and gently kissed the corner of her eyebrows. She touched the baby's eyes and found that she couldn't open them. Her eyes were closed, and her eyelashes were long, thick, and slightly curled. In this aspect, she resembled her father a lot. In her warm embrace, the baby suddenly opened her mouth and moaned. Her little mouth moved a little, as if she wanted to suck on something instinctively. The nurse was amused. She's going to drink milk. Yun Shusha asked, can she eat now? There's no rush to feed her. The little guy is so obedient and doesn't make a fuss. There are so many babies who just came out and they're crying so hard. She must take after her father in this aspect, right? Muyaja's face strangely turned red, and he smiled. He was actually shy. Don't say any more. Daddy is shy. Chapter 3041. Hubby, you're going to be a father again. He smiled, raised his hand, and gently caressed her cheek. Touched, he said, my wife, it's been hard on you. I won't. Yun Shusha lowered her head again and blinked. She wanted to see the little princess more clearly, but her vision was blurry. Even though she couldn't see, she felt more satisfied and happy with the child in her arms. As long as she can be healthy, I feel that all the pain and suffering is worth it. Are you tired? Why don't you rest for a while? Muyaja took the child from her arms, not wanting her to work too hard. Yun Shusha nodded and didn't force herself. She was happy that the child was born and wanted to hold it for a while longer. However, she was really exhausted after such an experience. Hence, she closed her eyes and fell asleep very quickly. When she woke up again, she had already been sent back to the ward. When she was awake, she heard Gong Jie and Hua Jin arguing. Yuyaro was smiling at me. This means that my niece and I have telepathy, Hua Jin emphasized. Before you came over, when I held her little hand, she was already smiling. Shut up. It's true. You're being unreasonable. Do you believe that I'll beat you up? I do. Then tell me, who exactly was she smiling at? You. Gong Jie's domineering tone and Hua Jin's resentful tone formed a stark contrast. The child had already been sent to the room. Gong Jie and Hua Jin rushed over excitedly to see the little princess. Hua Jin was the first to go up and grab Yueyao's hand. In the end, just as Yueyao's lips curled up, Gong Jie came over and saw it. He was pleasantly surprised and said that his niece was smiling at him. Hua Jin emphasized that Yuyaro was smiling at him, and he just happened to come over. The Gong Jie could not take it anymore. His face immediately darkened. Muyaja stayed by her bedside and held her hand. Although he wanted to be with his daughter, Gong Jie, Hua Jin, Yo-Yo, Xiao Chen, and Xiao Shui surrounded the little princess. With so many people accompanying the little princess, he felt sorry for his own woman and naturally wanted to protect his wife. For his little princess, his daughter had suffered so much. She was a daughter after all, so there would be a lot of time to accompany her in the future, but his woman had suffered so much, so he naturally had to take good care of her. Yun Shusha didn't open her eyes. She didn't have any strength, so she fell asleep again. Yo-Yo looked at the little princess and felt a little curious. Little sister's face is so wrinkled. Xiao Chen said, I was like this when I was born too. His face is so wrinkled and ugly. Yo-Yo gave him a sidelong glance. You've seen it before? Of course. Xiao Chen said, Daddy took a photo of me and even showed it to me. Oh, it's so disgusting. Hua Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How can you say that you're disgusting? But it's really disgusting. Xiao Chen said pitifully. Then he changed the topic and said proudly, but Daddy said that I was just born at that time and hadn't grown up yet. Aren't I still so beautiful now? Little sister is definitely prettier than me. Yo-Yo looked at him quietly from the side and then used his poisonous tongue. I hope little sister isn't as thick-skinned as you. Chapter 3042. You're the one who's not pretty. Xiao Chen was not angry. Instead, he retorted, we're twins. If you say that I'm not pretty, aren't you just indirectly saying that you're ugly? I'm more classy than you. I'm a little gentleman. I'm a little gentleman too. Gong Jie and Hua Jin stopped their bickering, but the two lads continued their debate relentlessly. Gong Jie shushed them. Keep your voice down. That's right. If the little princess wakes up, are you going to be responsible for feeding her? Xiao Shui said. Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen then tacitly shut their little mouths. Gong Jie said, I want to hug her. Hua Jin said, you can't hug her. If she wakes up, she'll really cry. Shusha is still sleeping and there's no one to feed her. Moreover, the nurse said that it's best to wait for the child to wake up naturally before feeding her. Xiao Chen said, when little sister was in mommy's stomach, she didn't drink milk for more than 9 months. Wouldn't she be hungry? Everyone was silent. This question also stumped Yo-Yo. Gong Jie couldn't answer it either. The group of people silently looked at Mu Yaja. Gong Jie said, brother-in-law, you're knowledgeable. Why don't you answer this question? Mu Yaja felt like an old bespectacled professor, and the group of people in front of him were all like giant babies. He ignored them. Everyone knew what was good for them. At this moment, Mu Yaja was guarding his wife. He couldn't be bothered with them. The group of people looked at the little princess fondly. In their eyes, the little Yu Yarrow was like a little angel flapping her wings. Her entire body was glowing. Even though Mu Yaja sent people to guard the news of Yun Shusha giving birth and surrounded the hospital tightly, there were still many media outlets that rushed over. Ever since she became pregnant, because Mu Yaja was very protective of his wife, Yun Shusha disappeared from the public for a long time. Fans were curious and looked forward to hearing news about Yun Shusha. However, when the reporters rushed over, they were stopped by the bodyguards at the entrance. They were chased away by the bodyguards. Some of them insisted on going to the hospital, so the bodyguards smashed their cameras and chased them away. Mu Yaja's attitude was so rude and unreasonable because he did not want the little princess to be exposed to the public. He naturally wanted to protect his daughter well. These paparazzi were angry, but they did not dare to say anything. After all, the Xingyu financial group was so big, and they knew Mu Yaja's means. Naturally, they did not dare to say anything. Some good friends naturally came to the hospital to visit when they heard the news of such a joyous occasion. However, at this time, Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen were like door gods. No one could hug, kiss, or touch them. At most, they could only take a few glances and exchange a few pleasantries before leaving. When Qin Ju rushed over, he was not even allowed to enter the door because the little princess was awake and Yun Shusha was breastfeeding her. He came in a hurry because he took time out of his schedule. He still had something to do and could not see Shusha, so he could only leave a few words with Hua Jin and give his blessings before leaving. As soon as Qin Ju left, Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu came with fruits and some tonics. Just as they reached the door, they were chased away by Mu Yaja. Chapter 3043. Jiang Shen felt that it was unfair and complained to his boss, "Can't we even visit the little princess?" "That's right. You're her uncle, after all. Why should you visit her?" Mu Yaja glared at Jiang Shen and asked, "Has the acquisition of Solomon been settled?" Jiang Shen looked away guiltily. He then questioned Lu Jinyu, "Has the Central Jin Guang land auction been registered?" Lu Jinyu coughed and cleared his throat. Why aren't you getting lost? Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun wiped away their bitter tears and returned to the office with their arms around each other's shoulders. A week after Yu Yarrow was born, her face was no longer wrinkled like when she was just born. The little girl's face had already returned to its original color. It was white and tender, as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Sometimes, Yun Shusha would sigh with emotion as she hugged Yu Yarrow. This was probably bliss. However, there were also times when she felt blissful. For example, when she was breastfeeding, the little Yu Yarrow would snuggle in her arms and enjoy the milk. Perhaps because the little Yu Yarrow was extremely hungry, she would use a lot of force when she was suckling, as if she wanted to suck her entire soul away. Mu Yaja said that this girl was like a greedy little cat when she was suckling. Yun Shusha felt that it was especially so, but she was so happy and fierce when she was suckling. It was quite painful. Why was she so greedy? When Yo-Yo was suckling, she wasn't like her. She was very reserved and quiet. She wasn't so fierce. But then again, why else would there be a saying about using all the strength of suckling milk? Haha. This frankincense was quite magical for a baby in swaddling clothes. Every time she was breastfeeding, she would carry the crying baby into Yun Shusha's arms. The little guy would almost instinctively burrow into her arms, accurately suckle his target, and then suckle hard. Yo-Yo said that she had seen a piglet sucking milk under an old sow's stomach on television. It was just like this. Although they did look alike. However, Mu Yaja was the first to disagree. Who are you calling a piggy? Who's the old sow? Yo-Yo smiled apologetically and turned to leave. This brat deserves a beating. Mu Yaja immediately coaxed her. Don't listen to him, you're not an old sow. She had originally thought that it was just a child's babble, but this man explained it seriously and even coaxed her. The more she listened, the more uncomfortable she felt. When she was breastfeeding, he was watching from the side. He was completely focused and did not take his eyes off her. He leaned very close to her and watched as the little princess's little mouth opened and closed. Unexpectedly, she also swallowed. Yun Shusha was shocked and asked, "What's that sound?" Why did it sound like he was swallowing his saliva? Mu Yaja snorted coldly, sounding displeased. Nothing. Seeing how the little Yu Yarrow was eating so well and was leaning on Yun Shusha's chest, occupying the spot that originally belonged to him, Mu Yaja felt a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, it was a daughter this time. If it was a son, he would feel even more indignant. However, was it because she was a little princess? He was happy to give her this privilege. Yun Shusha did not know whether to laugh or cry. What's the matter? Gluttonous. Yun Shusha blushed and couldn't help but push him. Hey, don't tell me, you want to drink milk too? Yes. Chapter 3044. Hey, don't be rash. You have such a big appetite. If you finish it all, what will Yu Yarrow drink? Fart. He couldn't help but give in when he saw how serious she was. He scratched her nose lightly and said, "I'm just teasing you." Yun Shusha laughed and said, "I'm teasing you too." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. The deep love in their eyes couldn't be concealed at all. Outside the door, Yo-Yo and Xiaochen were sitting on stools. Even though the two little guys were still young, Mu Yaja insisted that they stay away when Yun Shusha was breastfeeding. His attitude was not to be disobeyed. Yo-Yo said indignantly, "Daddy is really narrow-minded." Xiaochen said enviously, looking at little sister drinking milk, "I actually feel that she's enjoying it. Poor me, I grew up drinking milk powder." Yo-Yo asked curiously, "What milk powder did you drink?" Xiaochen shook his head. "I don't know. I didn't know anything back then. I stopped drinking milk when I was 3. Oh, I'll ask Daddy later." Seeing that Yo-Yo was so insistent on knowing the brand of milk powder, Xiaochen couldn't help but feel puzzled. "You want to drink it too?" "No." "Then why do you keep asking about the brand of milk powder I drink?" Yo-Yo said seriously, "If little sister drinks milk powder in the future, she won't drink this brand." Xiaochen was shocked. "Why?" "I suspect that you're so stupid because you drank this brand of milk powder." Xiaochen was once again struck by Yo-Yo's venomous tongue. He slumped into the chair, unable to get up. However, after spending so much time together, Xiao Chen was already used to Yo-Yo's venomous tongue. He ignored Yo-Yo and clenched his little fists tightly as though he was making a vow. He encouraged himself and said, "In the future, with a woman in our family, I must become stronger. Only then can I protect Mommy and my beloved sister." Yo-Yo said, "You just have to be smarter. Don't drag your sister down when the time comes." Xiao Chen felt wronged and said, "Yo-Yo, my heart hurts when you talk about your brother like that. Since you know that your brother is the oldest, it'll be embarrassing if little sister crushes your IQ in the future." Yo-Yo continued, "In the future, when little sister goes to school, she'll come to you with her homework. If you can't answer the questions correctly, little sister will despise you." Little Chen hummed in acknowledgement before saying, "Don't I have you? In the future, if little sister has a problem, she'll come to you. What about you?" Yo-Yo looked at him with disdain. "Me." Xiao Chen smiled proudly. "If anyone dares to bully little sister in the future, I'll let them have a taste of my fist. Violent maniac. What else can I do?" Xiao Chen put his hands on his hips indignantly. "If little sister gets bullied outside, do you think she can rely on your fancy martial arts skills?" Yo-Yo blushed guiltily. Indeed, his fists and kicks were no match for Xiao Chen's. He didn't know where Xiao Chen got his strange strength from. After feeding Yu Yaro, little Yu Yaro settled down. Mu Yaja opened the door and let the two little guys into the room. Yo-Yo ran to the bedside excitedly. He straightened his neck and said, "Mommy, Mommy, I want to hug little sister." However, Mu Yaja said, "No." Chapter 30:45. When Yo-Yo heard this, she pouted and said unwillingly, "Why? What if your arm can't hold little sister and she falls?" Xiao Chen came over and opened his arms. "Mommy, let me hold her. I'll hold her properly and not let her fall." Mu Yaja groaned but did not reject him. Yun Shusha also trusted him. He was taller than Yo-Yo and would definitely be able to hold the little princess steadily. However, she was still a little worried and asked, "Do you know how to hold her?" Xiao Chen nodded vigorously. Yes. The confinement nanny taught me. I learned it very seriously. The way to hold a child was also very particular. If the position was not right, the child would feel uncomfortable and cry loudly. Moreover, the bones of newborn babies were very soft. If one was not careful, it was possible to hurt the baby. Yun Shusha reminded him, "Then you must be gentle and be careful." Okay. Xiao Chen immediately walked over and took little sister from Yun Shusha's arms with a sincere expression. Yo-Yo stared at them from the side. When she saw that Xiao Chen could be held but she was not allowed to, she couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Biased. Daddy is biased. Mommy is biased too. He crossed his arms and sulked. He turned his head away and ignored them. Yun Shusha smiled helplessly. Then, she heard Xiao Chen suddenly whisper, "Little sister opened her eyes. She's looking at me." When Yo-Yo heard this, her anger immediately dissipated. She quickly went over and saw that the little princess, who was in Xiao Chen's arms, had suddenly opened her eyes. She had a pair of big, clear eyes. Her eyelashes were long and curly, and her eyeballs were as black and shiny as onyx. She blinked and clenched her little fists. As she looked at Xiao Chen, the corners of her eyes curved. Her cherry lips parted and revealed a bright smile. When Yo-Yo saw this, her heart almost melted. Her face flushed red and she wished she could snatch little Yu Yaro into her arms and hug her properly. However, this was just a thought. Yun Shusha suddenly said, "Does this child really like to cry? I saw other babies cry in the middle of the night after they were born. But little Yu Yaro only cries when she's hungry." When the confinement nanny changed her diaper, she was also surprised. She said that it's a miracle that she was born to smile. Mu Yaja said, "Little Yu Yaro Yo-Yo." Little Chen doted on her and carefully hugged her. However, to his surprise, little Yu Yaro reached out a chubby little paw and suddenly grabbed his collar. He did not know where she got her strength from, but she held on tightly. With a tug, her two little feet suddenly kicked as if she was excited. Yo-Yo's face flushed red when he saw how adorable little Yu Yaro was. He clamored for a hug and turned his head to plead, "Daddy, can't you let me hug her?" I'll sit on the bed and hug little Yuyaro carefully. She won't fall. When Mu Yaja saw that he really wanted to hug little Yuyaro, he nodded and said, okay. Thus, Yo-Yo excitedly took little Yuyaro from Xiao Ichen's arms. He had learned how to carry babies from the confinement nanny, and he had learned it together with Xiao Ichen. This was the first time he carried little Yuyaro in his arms. She was so small and soft that he could not bear to use his strength. Chapter 3046. When little Yuyaro saw him, she was also curious. She widened her eyes slightly and looked at him curiously. Yo-Yo gazed at her tenderly, his heart filled with tenderness. He had been looking forward to this little thing for a long time. He had always dreamed of having a younger sister and had been looking forward to it for a long time. He also had high hopes for Mu Yaja. Fortunately, his daddy had not let him down and had not made him wait for too long. His younger sister had been born for more than a week. Because she was sleeping most of the time, he rarely saw her open her eyes. Especially when she was smiling with her eyes open, it was very rare. Once, he heard his daddy mention that his younger sister loved to smile. When she smiled, her eyes would curve like two crescent moons. He was even more curious, but he never had the chance to see it. Even though his health was not good and he needed to rest recently and couldn't run much, he couldn't bear to go home when his younger sister was in the hospital. Every time he reluctantly went home and lay in bed, the image of his younger sister's young face would always appear in his mind. His heart felt so full, as if there was nothing filling it up. There was a voice that kept repeating, Yo-Yo, you finally have a younger sister. From now on, you must be the best brother in the world. Let your younger sister be the happiest sister in the world. When Yun Shusha was pregnant, he and Xiao Chen wrote in their diaries seriously, looking forward to their younger sister's arrival day and night. When Jiang Li came to visit Yun Shusha, she deliberately teased him and said, when you have a younger sister in the future, Daddy and Mommy will dote on her. They won't dote on you anymore. Now that the two-child policy was fully open, every family could have a second child. Jiang Li also wanted to have a second child. She wanted to have another son so that she could have both a son and a daughter. However, when she accidentally mentioned this to her daughter was very resistant and said that she didn't want a younger brother or sister. If she had a second child, she would run away from home. Nowadays, the majority of people were only children. However, when the second child era came, many older children were very resistant to it. Originally, the family revolved around one person. If they had a second child, it would mean that the younger brother or sister would take away the love that originally belonged to them. Naturally, the eldest son was unwilling. However, Yo-Yo said, even if my younger sister is born, Mommy will still dote on me. Says who? Look, your younger sister is so cute. Your mommy loves her so much. From now on, her love will not only belong to you and Xiao Chen. When Yo-Yo heard this, he smiled and said, if it's a younger sister, it's okay. He lowered his head and looked at the crib. His heart seemed to be filled with tenderness as he looked at the little life dotingly. He said softly, if it's a little sister, it's okay to share all the love that Mommy has for me with her. I will also pamper her and grow up with her. Jiang Li looked at him in surprise, only to see the gentleness in his eyes. He was so touched by this child. She said to Yun Shusha, Shusha, you're so lucky to have these two considerate kids. And I'm so jealous of you. Yun Shusha was also very touched. She had asked Yo-Yo in private if he would be jealous if they revolved around their younger sister in the future. Chapter 3047. Yun Shusha's heart was filled with warmth when she heard these words. At that moment, Yo-Yo hugged his little sister. His heart was filled with emotions. Ever since his little sister was born, there had been constant changes. Even though these changes were minimal, in Yo-Yo's eyes, they were huge changes. Now, she was gradually growing up. He lowered his head and sniffed gently. The little one had a milky fragrance that was unique to babies. How fragrant! Could it be that he was like this when he was young? Yo-Yo was thinking about it. However, the moment he lowered his head, little Yueyao's nose suddenly wrinkled. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly knitted together. A storm was brewing. Xiao Ichen noticed that something was wrong with her expression and exclaimed. In the next second, Little Yuyaro suddenly opened her mouth, straightened her throat, and started crying. Wah. Yo-Yo was startled by her crying. He looked at her, not knowing what to do. He didn't know why this little one was crying all of a sudden. Daddy, why is little sister crying? Muyaja walked over nervously. When he saw little Yuyaro crying at the top of her lungs and her little face flushed red, he thought that she was feeling unwell. He was also puzzled. He asked, could she be hungry? Shusha said strangely, she just breastfed. Why would she be hungry again? Xiao Chen said, could it be that it's time to change the diaper? The confinement nanny said that if little sister pees, she will feel uncomfortable and cry. Muyaja placed little Yuyaro on the bed. He took off the diaper and took a look. Her tender little butt was clean. Xiao Chen took a look and smiled. Has Daddy been changing little sister's diaper all this time? I see that Daddy's movements are very practice. Shusha said, your daddy only changes little sister's diaper occasionally. The confinement nanny is usually in charge. I think he's very skilled. Little Yuyaro was still crying non-stop. Muyaja held him in his arms and tried all sorts of ways to coax him. He gently patted him, but the little guy didn't seem to give him any face. His little face was still wrinkled, as if he had been greatly wronged, and he cried even harder. Xiao Ichen walked over and said obediently, let me sing for little sister. If my sister hears me sing, she definitely won't cry anymore. Don't. Muyaja said nervously, you're tone deaf. Don't scare your sister. Xiao Ichen suffered another blow and found it hard to defend himself. Why was Daddy the same as Yo-Yo? They always liked to attack him. He was so sad. Just as Xiao Ichen and Yo-Yo were feeling dejected, they heard Shusha say, it's probably because little sister recognized him. After all, this is your first time hugging her. Xiao Ichen immediately said, little sister won't cry when she's in my arms. Could it be that Yo-Yo didn't hug her properly? How is that possible? Yo-Yo was a little uneasy. He didn't know what was going on. Little sister was originally fine in his arms, but she suddenly started crying. He was a little worried. Could it be that little sister isn't feeling well? No way. It's probably because she recognized him. She'll be fine after some coaxing. Muyaja hugged Yuyaro and coaxed him. However, the strange thing was that after a few coaxes, the little guy's crying gradually weakened. Everyone was amazed. Muyaja patiently coaxed him for a long time. The little guy lay in his arms, staring at him with tears in his eyes. However, he stopped crying. Even Yo-Yo was amazed. Don't cry. Chapter 30-48. Daddy, let me hug her again. I haven't seen enough yet. Muyaja nodded. However, when Yo-Yo walked over and reached out his little hand, Yueao's nose wrinkled again and she burst into tears again. Yo-Yo instinctively retracted his hand and hid to the side. He stared at her innocently as if he had done something wrong. He pinched the corner of his shirt uneasily and looked a little lost. Muyaja looked at Yo-Yo's expression. For some reason, his heart ached. He immediately coaxed him and said, little sister wants to sleep. Is that so? However, Yo-Yo still felt sad. Little sister didn't seem to like him that much. It was fine when Xiao Chen hugged her or when Daddy hugged her, but why did little sister cry so badly when it was his turn? He felt sad and a little disappointed. He sat by the window and watched helplessly. His heart ached so much that his eyes almost turned red. Muyaja finally coaxed little sister to sleep and placed her in the crib. Xiao Ichen lay by the bed and watched. However, Yo-Yo didn't dare to go closer. He watched from afar, afraid that little sister would cry again if he went closer. Gong Jie and Hua Jin knocked on the door and walked in. Hua Jin held a box of food in his hand and said, it's time to eat. While Shusha was hospitalized, Hua Jin and Gong Jie stayed at the hospital every day. Shusha's meals were all taken care of by the confinement nanny. Tonight, they specially made white crucian carp soup. It was said that drinking this soup would nourish qi, strengthen the spleen, clear the channels, and lower the breast. She drank it for 2 consecutive days and didn't feel anything special. However, there was indeed such a saying. As for Muyaja, Gong Jie, and the others, they naturally settled their own meals. If there were no special circumstances, Mu Yaja basically stayed close to her. When Gong Jie and Hua Jin went out to eat, they would bring back fast food for him. Sometimes it was a box lunch, and sometimes it was cooked by Hua Jin himself. Hua Jin's culinary skills were not bad, and Mu Yaja recognized it. Sometimes, he would take the initiative to ask to eat Hua Jin's cooking. Yo-Yo sat at the table unhappily. She held her chopsticks and looked at the sumptuous dishes, but she had no appetite. Gong Jie saw this and couldn't help but scratch his nose. What's wrong? Why do you look so glum? Uncle, will little sister cry when you hug her? Gong Jie was a little confused. He raised his eyebrows and said, No, Yu Yao doesn't like to cry. She especially likes to laugh. Why are you asking this? Yo-Yo then asked Hua Jin, What about Uncle Hua Jin? Hua Jin covered his face and said, I haven't hugged her yet. He wanted to hug her too, but Mu Yaja and Gong Jie both disagreed. Yo-Yo was even more disappointed. Little sister cries a lot when I hug her, Hua Jin remarked. Isn't it normal for such a small child to cry and throw a tantrum? But everyone says that little sister loves to laugh and rarely cries. Why did she cry when she was in my arms? Gong Jie rubbed his round face and said, You can try again next time. Maybe little sister is sleepy and wants to sleep. A baby this big is especially sleepy. Don't think too much, okay? Oh. Yo-Yo had originally thought that this situation was probably just a coincidence, so he didn't think too much about it. However, he didn't expect that this situation would continue to happen. The next day, Yo-Yo went to the hospital. The confinement nanny had just changed the baby's diaper. He walked over and asked to hug little sister again. Chapter 3049. After receiving his permission, Yu was elated and carried Yu Yaro in his arms. However, the little thing was originally grinning from ear to ear. When she was carried in his arms, she did not react at first, but after a while, just like last night, a storm was brewing. She whimpered for a while, blinked her eyes, and 2 drops of tears fell. Her tears fell rapidly and slid down her cheeks. Her cries were earth-shattering as they escaped her little mouth from her throat. Yo-Yo was caught off guard. He watched as her little mouth opened wide. He could even see the quivering little tongue in the depths of her throat. Wah! The little one opened her mouth and cried earth-shatteringly. She even lifted her little leg and kicked his arm, as though she despised him. She used a lot of strength. Yo-Yo was in pain from the kick, but he didn't dare to let go, for fear that he would hurt his little sister in his arms. The confinement nanny hurriedly took the child from him and coaxed her for a long time. In the end, she still ended up in Yun Shusha's arms. Only then did she stop crying. When Yo-Yo saw that this situation had repeated itself, he was extremely upset. He sat in a corner with his handsome brows slightly furrowed. Disappointment was written all over his face. Yun Shusha couldn't see the disappointment on his face, but Mu Yaja could. He pulled him to the front of the room and stared at his face as he asked, What's the matter? You don't look happy. Daddy, Yo-Yo fiddled with his soft fingers, feeling aggrieved. His eyes suddenly reddened and his voice became choked with sobs. He sounded as though he was about to cry. Does little sister not like me? Mu Yaja was stunned. He frowned and asked, How could that be? Little sister must hate me. Otherwise, why would she cry whenever I hug her? Yo-Yo sobbed as though he had suffered a great grievance. His tears fell instantly. He raised his hand and wiped away the tears at the corners of his eyes. He sniffled and was extremely upset. He rarely cried, and even more rarely showed such a helpless and flustered expression. He always had a calm and collected expression, probably because he was too sad, too upset, and also a little scared. His imagination was running wild, and he was worried that his sister really hated him, so he felt very wronged. Mu Yaja had never been good at comforting others. Seeing that little Munchkin was so upset, he only patted him on the shoulder lightly, but it was difficult to console him. When Yun Shusha heard this, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. She immediately said, Yo-Yo, don't let your imagination run wild. Little sister, why would little sister hate to you? Then why does she cry whenever I hug her? He was even more aggrieved. I didn't want little sister to hate me. To his terzes to ss tus, his events to little to yo s. Tus. I like little sister so much. I think she likes me as her brother too. Mu Yaja hugged him gently. Xiao Ichen was beside them, but he didn't know how to comfort him. At this moment, the confinement nanny walked over and said with a smile, Yo-Yo, could it be that the smell of Chinese medicine on you is too strong? Although little sister is still young, her nose is very sensitive. Of course she doesn't like the smell of Chinese medicine. When Xiao Ichen heard this, he immediately leaned over and sniffed his body. He nodded and said, yeah, the smell of Chinese medicine is indeed a little strong. He had indeed been drinking Chinese medicine for the past few days. Is that really the case? Yo-Yo stopped crying. He raised both his arms and sniffed himself, but he couldn't smell anything. This was because he had been drinking Chinese medicine and his nose was already used to the smell. He couldn't smell anything strange anymore. Chapter 30-50. His heart wasn't good. Every time the season changed, his heart would palpitate if he didn't take care of it. Hence, he had been drinking Chinese medicine for the past few days. People who drank Chinese medicine would more or less have the smell of Chinese medicine on them. They might not be able to smell it normally because the smell was very faint if they kept a distance. However, when they were close enough, they could smell it clearly. Because of that, Yu Yarrow, who was being held in his bosom, was able to smell it the clearest. Because of that, she began to resist. The child was still young and couldn't speak yet. Hence, she could only cry to express her dissatisfaction. The confinement nanny was just saying it to comfort him, telling him not to take this matter to heart. However, the boy, who loved his sister dearly, kept this matter in his heart. When he got home that night, the nanny had boiled the Chinese medicine and placed it on the table. She called out to him, Yo-Yo, time to drink your medicine. After Yun Shusha gave birth, Mu Yaja had arranged for her to go to the best confinement center in the capital for her confinement. During her absence, he had hired a nanny to take care of the two children. Yo-Yo walked over and glanced at the Chinese medicine. Suddenly, he remembered how his sister had cried and his heart ached again. It was all this Chinese medicine's fault. He hated this medicine to the core. However, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said to the nanny, Auntie, I'll bring it back to my room to drink. Okay, be careful. It's hot. You can drink it after it cools down. Okay. Yo-Yo picked up the bowl and walked back to his room. The nanny reminded him from behind, be careful, don't spill it. Okay, got it. Yo-Yo carried the bowl back to his room and closed the door. He lowered his head and sniffed it. Instantly, he frowned. Indeed, Chinese medicine smelled really bad. If he hadn't been used to it and drank it often, he probably wouldn't have been able to stand the smell. Thinking of Yu Yarrow, he hesitated for a moment. Then, he walked to the bedside, opened the window, and poured the medicine out onto the flower bed. He was smart enough to keep a mouthful and not pour it all out. Every time he drank it, there would be some dregs left. If he poured it all out at once, it would arouse suspicion. After sitting in the room for half an hour, he walked out with the bowl of medicine and placed it on the table. He said to the housekeeper, It's finish. The nanny walked over with the clean clothes, but she didn't think much of it. She nodded and said, Leave it there. I'll wash it later. Yes. Okay, thank you, Auntie. This child, there's no need to be so polite. Yo-Yo's thoughtfulness warmed her heart. Hence, she did not realize that the child was doing something behind her back. Xiao Ichen was still reading in the study. He still remembered what Yo-Yo had said a few days ago. Hence, at night, he still worked hard. He took out his problem book and racked his brains to calculate. Yo-Yo went into the bathroom. When he showered, he used a lot of body wash and rubbed it all over his body. After washing twice and wiping himself clean, he took a whiff. He was still worried, so he secretly rubbed some body wash on himself to make sure that he smelled good. Then, he changed into his pajamas and walked into the study. Xiao Ichen was still calculating when he suddenly saw his problem book covered by a shadow. Chapter 30-51. Do I smell good? The corner of little Ichen's eyes twitched violently as he sniffed seriously. Yes. It's the scent of shower gel. Does it still smell like Chinese medicine? With Yo-Yo's reminder, Xiaochen was shocked and said, "No, I can't smell it anymore." That was strange. Every time he drank the medicine, the smell of Chinese medicine would be very strong. He asked nervously, "What's wrong? Did you forget to drink the medicine?" "I drank it." "Really?" Every time he drank it, he would smell like Chinese medicine. "Don't lie to me. If you stop taking the medicine, I already said that I drank it." Yo-Yo continued, "But I used a lot of shower gel and some perfume. My little sister won't despise me if I smell good like this." Xiao Ichen smiled and nodded. However, Yo-Yo wasn't in a hurry to carry Yuyao. Instead, he secretly stopped taking medicine for 2 days. He was only relieved when he didn't smell like Chinese medicine after 2 days. However, when he stood in front of the crib and looked down at the little thing lying in the crib with her eyes wide open and her little feet kicking around, he felt a little scared. He raised his arm solemnly and sniffed his sleeve. When he couldn't smell any Chinese medicine, he took a deep breath and smiled. This was because he was afraid that he wouldn't smell like Chinese medicine this time. At this time, the reason why he resisted the smell of Chinese medicine would no longer be valid. What if his little sister cried again? Then she would really hate him. He was afraid that his little sister wouldn't like him. Xiao Ichen encouraged him. "Yo-Yo, what are you waiting for? Didn't you say that you wanted to carry your little sister?" Yo-Yo felt uneasy and hesitated for a long time. Then, he carefully carried Yuyao in his arms. Yo-Yo looked at the little girl in his arms. She was sucking on her thumb and looking at him with a pair of curious eyes. Yo-Yo's heartbeat suddenly quickened. He was worried that she would cry in the next second. Muyaja looked at him from the side. He saw Yo-Yo hugging Yuyao with a solemn and sincere expression. It was as if the person in his arms was a holy little angel that no one could blaspheme. She stared at him and he stared back at her. Yo-Yo held his breath as she stared at him curiously. The little thing's eyebrows had yet to fully develop, and its face was still chubby. This was the real baby fat. Its eyelids were slightly swollen, but its eyeballs were as black as agate. Yet, they exuded a lively aura, as if they were the purest spring water in the world. Just as he was feeling extremely nervous, he saw the little thing in his arms smiling at him. Its round eyes curved into 2 small crescent moons. Its childish smile was soundless, but it could melt one's heart. She was especially beautiful when she smiled. At that moment, Yo-Yo really felt as if he had seen an angel smile. The nervousness on his face immediately dissipated. He looked up at Muyaja agitatedly and exclaimed, "Daddy, little sister is smiling at me, I saw it." Yo-Yo was extremely touched. He gently rubbed his face against her face and let out a crisp laugh. "Little sister, I'm your brother. My name is Yo-Yo. Hello." Yo-Yo looked up and his gaze landed on Yueyao's soft face. His handsome eyes were filled with doting laughter. He exhaled softly and said, "Yuyao, welcome. Welcome to this world." Chapter 3052. This was probably a formal greeting between him and little Yuyao. Xiaochen's heart was also warmed by this scene. He walked over to Yo-Yo's side and rested his chin gently on his shoulder. He quietly watched the soft little girl stretch her limbs in Yo-Yo's arms. She put her chubby little paws in her mouth and curled them up sometimes. "You even know how to curl your fingers." Xiaochen quickly moved her paws away and said, "You can't bite your hand." Then, he used his own hand to wipe away the saliva on her hand. Hua Jin laughed beside them. Yuyao really knows how to reincarnate. She has 2 older brothers who dote on her so much. She's amazing. For some reason, little Yuyao opened her mouth and spat out a small bubble. She smacked her lips and put her fingers in her mouth again. Her eyes darted around nimbly as she looked at the world around her curiously. Muyaja saw this and was amused. What is she looking at? She's probably looking at the 2 older brothers. Gongjie walked over and said to Yo-Yo, "Let uncle carry her." "No." Yo-Yo defended her and pouted. Little sister finally stopped crying. "Let me carry her for a while longer." Gongjie frowned as well. "I haven't been able to carry her for the past few days. Little Yuyao wants to see uncle too. Let me have her." Yo-Yo turned around and refused to let him have her. Xiao Ichen was amused by this and said, "From now on, little sister won't have to walk anymore. When we go out, I'll have to carry Yo-Yo, Yo-Yo will have to carry Mommy, and Uncle and Daddy will have to fight with me to carry her. Don't tell me her calves are going to become ornaments." Yun Shusha leaned on the bed and said with a smile, "All right. Stop messing around with her. Give her to me. It's time to feed her." When Mu Yaja heard this, he hurriedly stood up and carried the child into her arms. Then, he turned around and looked around meaningfully. Everyone received his gaze and tactfully walked out of the door. Only after everyone had left did she lift her clothes to feed her nipple. While the baby was suckling, Mu Yaja sat by the bed and looked around. Suddenly, he said, "This baby's eyes are like yours." "How can you tell?" "I can tell just by looking at the outline of his eyes." Mu Yaja gently pinched her cheeks, not daring to use too much force. It was just a symbolic touch, and it felt as smooth as milk. He added, "Someone like you will definitely be a beauty when you grow up. Didn't they say that daughters look a little like their fathers?" He still couldn't tell right now, so he couldn't rush to a conclusion. "I think that if a daughter looks like you, she'll be even prettier." Mu Yaja looked at her, his heart filled with infinite tenderness. It was a little different from when he held Muichen in his arms when he was born. At that time, he hadn't experienced her pregnancy, and he hadn't been by her side to guard her and accompany her through all those joys and sorrows. He hadn't been in the delivery room to witness the arrival of life with his own eyes. Hence, when Muichen was carried into his arms, he looked at him and exclaimed in his heart, "Oh, this is my son." However, although he was happy, he wasn't deeply moved. As Xiao Ichen grew up, he didn't know how to play the role of a father. He only knew that he couldn't spoil him too much. Otherwise, he would spoil him too much and that wouldn't be good. Chapter 3053. Therefore, he was strict with his son. That was his education philosophy. Xiao Ichen had once been in awe of him. However, when he was with her, the fatherly instinct in him seemed to have finally awakened. He also knew that if he doted on the child properly, the child would not be spoiled. Especially when she was preparing for labor, he deeply understood that it was not easy for a little life to come into being. The process in between was mixed with pain and happiness, as well as the anxiety of waiting. Therefore, when he looked at little Yuyaro, he was no longer the ignorant father from 8 years ago. He was a mature and steady father. If one were to say that Yun Shusha's appearance had changed him, for he had always been arrogant and insufferably arrogant. However, she had gently ground away his sharpness and edges, turning him into a man who knew how to love. In that case, Yu Yaro's appearance had instilled boundless tenderness into his heart, allowing him to become an even gentler father. When he looked at her, she looked at him too. He suddenly had a feeling in his heart. For her, everything was worth it. He wanted to give her the best things in the world. This feeling might have something to do with the special relationship between father and daughter. Why else would people say that daughters were their father's lovers in their previous lives? With such a special fate, Mu Yaja's love for Yuyaro was even more indescribable. He loved her deeply and wanted to take good care of her. Some children's hair was not thick when they were born. However, little Yuyaro had thick black hair, long eyelashes, and fair but healthy skin. When Yun Shusha was pregnant, she paid attention to the balance of nutrition. In addition, her and Mu Yaja's genes were not bad. No matter how they gave birth, the child would be good-looking. Therefore, when the nurse carried the child for the injection, the other nurses saw it and were extremely envious. With their rich experience, they could tell at a glance that this child would definitely be a beauty when she grew up. When little Yuyaro was given an injection, she attracted a lot of attention. Even the directors of the obstetrics and gynecology department came out when they heard the news. When the child was brought back, the nurse said with relish, "Didn't you see those doctors fighting to carry her? I didn't even let them. They said that this little princess can't recognize people and would cry if she were to be carried by anyone. They all said how regretful they were. Then they all said that this child would definitely be very good-looking when she grows up." When Mu Yaja heard this, he raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't you know whose daughter she is?" There was a hint of smugness in his words. He was showing off. The nurse said to Yun Shusha, "Shusha, you're so lucky. You have such a handsome husband, a pair of handsome sons, and a daughter who is as beautiful as a little angel. God's favor, God's favor. Before Yun Shusha could speak, Mu Yaja said, "You're wrong." "What? What do you mean?" Mu Yaja gazed at Yun Shusha affectionately and said, "It's my good fortune to be able to marry her." This sentence was like a piece of sweet candy that melted on the tip of her tongue. The nurse was even more envious and couldn't help but say, "You two are so loving." With that, she left. After she left, only the two of them were left in the room. Little Yuyaro was asleep, while Gong Jie and the others brought Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen to Laji Holdings to do some shopping. Chapter 3054. Yo-Yo waved his hand and said that he was going to buy clothes, toys, and teething sticks for his sister. Gong Jie wanted to see the little princess more, but in the end, he was dragged away by Yo-Yo. Mu Yaja sneered in his heart. This son of his knew how to read people's faces. He knew that they had not enjoyed their time together for a long time. Recently, Laji had launched a new baby and baby counter. It was said that Yo-Yo had suggested it when Yun Shusha was pregnant. Laji had basically been taken over by Li Hanlin. Li Hanlin had been promoted to CEO of Laji and Yo-Yo had retired behind the scenes. He did not want to waste time on other things. After Yun Shusha was pregnant, he decided to spend more time with his sister. To welcome his sister, he had especially urged Li Hanlin to develop the baby and baby market. After 8 months of preparation, Laji had launched the baby and baby counter. However, in recent days, there had been complaints from consumers that the baby and baby products in the counter were more targeted at baby girls. This was what Yo-Yo had requested. This was one of his selfish reasons. When he had free time, he would scribble on a piece of paper and design some toys for his sister. The product development required some time, so he had to come up with the idea in advance. When his sister was old enough to play with toys, he wanted to let his sister play with the toys he had designed. Because of the birth of little Yuyaro, he did not take care of the Deva Eye project. He threw the half-drawn blueprint aside and did not care about it anymore. Gong Jie did not care about it either. Even if he was ambitious about the Deva Eye project, it was not as important as his niece. Even if it was the Hurricane Group's affairs, Yo-Yo had also kicked it aside. The room was quiet. Little Yuyaro was sleeping soundly. Mu Yaja lay down on the bed and held her in his arms. She had been sleeping quietly, but was disturbed by his actions. She frowned and felt his hot breath on her cheeks. The next moment, the man lowered his head and kissed her lips. It felt like he hadn't kissed her for a long time. He kissed her, but he didn't dare to take her any deeper. However, when their lips parted, Mu Yaja lowered his gaze and stared into her eyes. Her beautiful cheeks, which seemed to have been dyed with rouge, and her eyes seemed to be able to hook his soul. He actually could not bear to part with her just like that. Therefore, when